Zombo hours in the house.
We can play it
Yeah.
off. We're live, by the way. We can play it off like we're just letting the room get filled before we start the show. We got 5 minutes. I, I,
Momento sambo,
Like
momento
on
sambo
some MC
futurista.
shit.
I just got home, man. I had a really long day. I had to drive like 2 hours. It was a good day. Marcus is also.
Yeah, Marcus, you should mute yourself.
Let's give it another 2 minutes as the room gets filled, and I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody see the audience to their seats, please.
What's up, everybody? It's the OG, the Loco Hour. Thank you very much for coming in. Stand-up comedy routine night at the Laugh Factory, live from LA, California. Hope everybody's doing well.
So
I see.
Klaus, so I have a question. Like I was hearing some interview. Actually, it was Guillermo's interview the other day, the one from some months ago. And like you lived in Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates.
Yes.
So why do you speak like a black man in English?
Do I? Well, I break into Ebonics at times, but not always.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking that. I was like, oh, Klaus, he sounds like he grew up in the hood, and then I hear all about like you living it up with the Arab princesses in Dubai or whatever.
Well, here's the thing. Here's where I picked it up. Actually, this is going to be the funniest thing ever. So I went to college in the U.S., right? And obviously you have dorm mates when you get set up in your dorms. And so I picked up Ebonics, funny enough, from a gay Bahraini guy who lived most of his life in the UK and used to say nigga all the time, like, nigga, what's up? And so like, obviously he was gay, but he was in the closet about it. So he was kind of like, he had this, I don't know why gay people have this sassy black girl thing going on to them. So every time I'd meet him, he's like, yo, what's up, nigga? Like, so I just like picked it from him. So it's weird.
So you're a child of globalism, then, like
in many ways, yeah, pretty much you could say so.
We all are. We're all LARPing as returning to being trad, but we're all childs of globalization and post modernity. Oh my god, that word. The D's and the R's in English kill me.
Yeah. But I've gotten shit from both sides. People telling me I sound too black. Some people telling me I sound too white. And it's like, well, I wasn't raised with, I cannot talking like this because I not raised like that. That would be
I noticed.
Nation.
I noticed you have like a talent for imitating accents. So that means like you have some kind of like easy time learning languages and I'm a little bit like that too. You put me in a room with like 3 people from Argentina for 1 hour and I come out, speaking with like the Argentinian accent, stuff like that happens. For instance, in Spanish, I almost completely lost my Venezuelan accent. But then, after talking to my mom and my dad for 1 hour, my wife is all like you slip back into it.
Yeah. I mean, I love languages. That I definitely do love.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully I get to master Arabic and French. I do like Arabic, so.
Nice. We should all be learning the next imperial language. We're here wasting our time learning. What are we learning? French? Come on, we should be learning. That's right.
Damn, that's fucking impressive. I don't know, man.
Dude, I said nothing. That was all gibberish. I just know how to imitate the intonation, but I said absolutely nothing.
Oh, okay.
Nigga, I don't know Chinese. I'm gonna be Chris Tucker, Rush Hour. I don't know Chinese. Anyway, we're wasting here. We're burning time because somebody who shall not be named kind of forgot we had this live stream today at this hour.
Yeah, but I mean the audience loves this. Who cares? And if they don't, fuck them anyway.
Make a better live stream. You take notes on the E. Michael Jones and Jared Taylor debate. You do
Yeah,
it.
you can do it. There's a lot of critics, but there's never anyone that ever wants to do shit on their own. I've noticed.
The audience is never right. The audience is never like the customer is never right. That idea that you got to like serve the customer and that's Americanism. That's Americanism calling. It's nowhere like that anywhere. Like you go everywhere else and like salesmen treat you like shit. And it's like you don't want to buy, get out of my store. I don't care.
No, I agree. That's the only way to go. Let's read some comments. Is there anything good here? Let's see. What did you think of my talk with Arjuna, Billy? I didn't listen to it yet. Sorry to say, Zoltanis. I'm going to in a little bit. Just haven't had the time. Lido Lee, learn Spanish before you get sassy, Billy. I keep that in mind. Let's see. White people need the credit they deserve. The Southern accent. All right.
I mean, that's true. A lot of what people consider to be Ebonics does actually come from white Southerners. So the whole y'all thing, obviously, that comes from.
No, you don't understand, dude. These are two very separate people that have nothing to do with one another.
I'm nothing like them Negroes, Billy. Hell, you're talking about.
Yep. Oh, man. Well, at least Marcus isn't making the sounds from the car. That's an improvement.
Niggas be driving while light is streaming.
Hey, you guys don't like the Charger? You don't like the
Don't stream and drive, nigga. That's rule number 1.
Some of our best stuff has been done when I'm driving. Like the Che interview, I was on the interstate the whole time.
What? I thought you were at your desk.
Nah, hell no. I was driving 70 on the interstate.
We spent 8 hours recording a thing on Che, like in your car.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cool.
Well, Americans are stuck to their cars.
Yes.
I commute a lot. I go all the way into Texas. I go all the way up to like North Carolina. So.
Oh shit, you go pretty far.
Yeah, I commute a lot. Part of my job.
OG del Negro back?
Yes, I am back. Today
OG del Zambo.
Yeah. Tap into your inner Zambo, you guys. He's somewhere in there. A couple generations ago. Anyways, man, yeah, I just got home too, man. Today's been a long day, but it's been very, very fruitful. So I'm in a good mood. How's everybody doing?
Bien, gracias a Dios.
So, who do we have in the panel? We have Tercio, we have Klaus, we have Guillermo, and we have Marcus. Cicero, what's up, everybody?
Hey, good to be here.
Cool. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about. Actually, let me introduce the show. What's up, everybody? This is Noel OG del Rancho. Today on the Pocho Hour, we are reviewing the great debate between Michael Jones and what's his white dude's name? Jared Taylor.
Jared Taylor.
It was White Taylor.
White. I don't know if you guys have seen the debate. A lot of people have seen it. It was very, very good. I would recommend everybody watch it. You're more than likely to have a bias going into it already, so you might need to watch it too. And but today we're gonna. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say we're not neutral. We're like pro EMJ here, but
we're siding with the biracial man here.
Right. And I feel like it was a very good debate. I thought it was. I mean, it was almost like there was a couple self-owns that came out, and then he just confirmed, as far as I'm concerned, like jam culture. Like he is jam culture in a man.
I don't think he even denies it either. That's the best part.
Yeah, that's what I mean about the self-owns. Go ahead, you guys. I don't know if somebody else wanted to share something.
I'm good. I'm ready to dig in.
Why don't we get... Go ahead.
We got the first pick-me of the night. Mestizo Mexican says, incredible live stream. EMG got destroyed.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We'll see about that.
There's Picho. How you doing, Picho? Okay, yeah, let's get into it. So, I don't know if I mean, Marcus, have you been on the show yet?
I don't think I've been on your show yet. No, I don't
Okay,
think so. I've posted comments and stuff, but
yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself? This is Marcus Cicero, you guys. I'll let you take the lead on that, Marcus.
sure. I'm Marcus Cicero. I'm a former white nationalist. I actually helped found the Daily Stormer back in 2013. That's how far back I go. I've dealt with a lot of these wignats. I know them very well.
You're one of the OGs of this whole thing.
There's only about half a dozen leader figures that have been around longer than me. And I finally just got sick of it all. I left it. I renounced it. I renounced whiteness. I'm a Slav. I'm not a white person.
That's right.
I don't want to look. If you want to be part of whiteness now, it's like going to a high school drinking party after the cops are already there and they're arresting everybody. I mean, it's stupid. Like you've got nothing to gain and everything to lose. And I learned, you know what? I want to be in touch with my culture. I come from an immigrant family, so I can still have those ties where I don't have to be absorbed into the American blob that's really just whiteness or blackness. With no real culture except Walmart, crystal meth, and just hating people really for no reasons whatsoever. And you'll see a lot of it. Someone like Jared Taylor, right? He's an elite white person, right? Anglo-descended, very well educated, went to the best schools, lived abroad for a while.
His family's from the Mayflower too.
Yeah, he is like OG American. He's as American as they come. But under it all, really, like when you think about it, all he wants to do is have a supremacist system where his people are at top, right? So if you're on one of these peripheral white groups, like if you're an Italian, or if you're Polish or Russian or Bulgarian or Romanian, or if you're Hispanic, right? You're garbage in these people's eyes. They'll use you to achieve what they want. They'll preach solidarity. They'll talk about pan-white nationalism or pan-European solidarity. But at the end of the day, it's an Anglo-Judaic world. They want the power. They want the power they used to have. And they'll throw you under the bus the first second they get.
Yeah, you're saying as basically somebody who's peripherally white as a Slav.
Yeah, I mean, I could pass as white. I could say I'm white. I could check the little box on the census that says I'm white. But I can also identify with my ethnic roots far easier than a lot of people can.
Honestly, I don't know how you, as a Slav, don't want to take responsibility for British colonialism and Anglo-Saxon liberalism. I don't know why you don't want to take part of that. Like, makes no sense. We're all brothers here. We're all white brothers.
Yeah, and Hitler was trying to help you guys, you know?
Yeah, he was trying to help you. We're all friends.
Yeah. He just wanted to unite all the white people to fight Bolshevism.
Here, Marcus, you're kind of breaking up. Just say that one more time. You're completely just gone. Yeah, I think Marcus is kind of out of a signal, so... Yeah.
Posted up back in my house.
Listen, just park in one of the temples of capitalism in the United States, like a Walmart or something. Just park there and
I got a Baptist church. Does that work?
No, that's not.
That's demonic.
That's as close as you get to an American ethnos.
Yeah. No, you want something really white. You want a McDonald's, or you want a Walmart, maybe a Target. I think Target.
Or Pizza Hut. Matt Parrott's a big fan of Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut, yeah. So go for the whitest thing.
Trailer park? I just passed one.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that with us, Marcus. I mean, I think it's interesting. You know, a lot of people get emotional around these conversations, but I think it's just being dispassionate and matter of fact. It's like the reality is it's late in the American party. And, you know, what Marcus said is just true for him as a son of Slavic immigrants, as it is for anybody else who's trying to, I guess, assimilate into what? Like the party's over. Like
I'm Castizo, bro.
like there's only like 2 slices of pizza left that are cold. Like there's no more beer. Like all the hot people left to the after party already. Like it's just like the hoes nobody even wants to touch that are passed out on the couch and like nasty ass dudes who are making out with them. Like I don't know if you guys ever been to those parties like at that time and it's like what the fuck, let's roll. That's where it's at. It's just being matter of fact. And I think it's just stubbornness that's going to stop you from admitting that. And you know, and I'm trying to be empathetic here. If you are a white American, a deracinated, essentially generic white American, and a Amerimut for lack of a better term, like what do? You know, it's like your idols are melting in front of you. You realize that they're not real, and so you need new gods. And I don't mean that like the group of people, no, but you need God. You need to go back to God. Like that's the answer. Go back to church, capital C. Figure out what that means if you need to do that. But yeah, we're gonna get into all this today. I'm really excited for the show. So why don't we dive in? What do we have at the top of the item list? I'm putting up my notes right now.
I was gonna say, I think we might have Fascifist sort of like rebuttal to E. Michael Jones that starts. We can play unless we have something earlier than that. I think that's the first thing we have.
Let me pull it.
What's
I think
the timestamp?
The timestamp's like 8 minutes in.
But I would like to, like, even if we do it twice the speed, like the intro of Jarrett Taylor, because it's very telling. Like he tips his hand very early with the introduction.
I mean, yeah, just do it at twice speed because we're gonna have to listen up to like 8 minutes, just so we can play Fascifist's rebuttal since he's Indian and he actually knows how the caste system worked.
Okay, perfect. So let me introduce that real quick. So we're gonna show you guys, for those who haven't seen it, the intro, which Jared Taylor brought, and we're gonna play it at like 1.5 to 2 times. Play it as fast as possible with it being understandable. So let's go ahead and do that.
All right, so at the 8-minute mark.
No. Just start like whenever Jared. So the debate is broken up into like little segments. So they first each get 20 minutes initial statements, and so I think Jared starts, and then is EMJ.
Yeah,
and
so
then
like
they get to.
Do you know the timestamp, Tercio?
No, I don't know.
In America since the 90s.
Hold up.
He's been doing this for a long.
I'll just ask real quick for the
It is an understanding that human
There we go.
Okay, here we go.
concepts
Hold
of
up.
We appreciate you guys' patience and apologize.
Fiction.
For
I would start like 4 minutes in and just
Kind of
play at
social
2 times speed.
Hold
that
up.
prevailed upon you to let
Okay.
Yeah.
there we go. Everyone ready?
Around that, yeah.
me show a few images. So if we can go there now, and I will start my timer. And so I will go no more than 20 minutes.
Let me know when to stop.
Starting now. So yes, indeed. The question before us today is race an important reality or a fiction? And I believe that in a single image, I can explain that it is not a fiction, and that would be this image here. I think it would be difficult to argue that the man on the right.
Doug, my bad. Can you go back to the question and let me hear exactly what he said? Because
Yeah, we need to go back a bit. Like this is a bit too, like.
Wanted to have
Yeah.
you back, Dr.
that
John.
was
Welcome.
fine. That was fine.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can you slow it down a little
And I
bit?
believe that in
The 125.
So the
right.
question is race an important reality or a fiction? Okay, and now Jared Taylor is going to give his answer to it.
In a single image, I can explain that it is not a fiction, and that would be this image here. I think it would be difficult to argue that the man on the right, the differences between him and the other people in this picture are some kind of fiction. No, there is clearly something more than fiction. It is biology. And even if one accepts the fashionable view that race is some kind of social construct, I would also point out that subjectively, race is real. Race is not a fiction. Now look at these people. These people clearly believe that race is an important part of their individual and group identities. Anything that motivates people in this fashion is unlikely to be a fiction. I would also argue that people have been noticing race and not considering it a fiction for thousands of years. What we have here is an image from the Egyptian Book of Gates. This is 2,500 years old. And this book distinguished between 4 races of man. At that time, the Egyptians were familiar with what they called Libyans, Nubians, Asiatics, and Egyptians. I'm sure that if they had been familiar with Caucasians and Eskimos, they would have made a distinction between them as well. And biological distinctions have been observed, noted, and their significance has been taken for granted throughout antiquity. This is a book, Invention of Racism in Classical Antiquity.
Hold on for
And I
one
would like to
sec,
quote
guys.
from-
Pause for 1 sec. For 1 sec here. This is going to be best for Marcus to see because he actually has like a master's in antiquity, just so you guys understand. But keep going. Well, we can summarize to him what
I
it
want to
is.
say something. I want to say something though.
Yeah, no, go for it.
This is a typical issue that we have with the modernist or modern racism, which is that they want to say like, oh, biological differences have always been noted. And it's like, no, they have not been noticed because biology did not exist until 100 years ago, 200 years ago at best. So it's like what they noticed was something different, but they weren't like, we want to call it by different names. Like they may have noticed like different characteristics or something like that. We can call it today in the 21st century, maybe biological differences. But these people in the past, and this is something that's very important to notice or to note for for the rest of the debate, is that the people of the past did not think in biological terms because biology was not even a science. It's a very recent science phenomenon, much less they thought in genetic terms because genes are even, obviously they're younger than biology as a science. So it might sound like a nitpick, but we got to keep in mind that these people love to sort of like project the present onto the past all the time.
Well, let me just say this too, okay? Because I remember I've seen actual Wignats like cite this book before on like social media. And what the Wignats are ultimately doing when they do this sort of thing is they're setting up a situation where they desperately want to believe this. So they seek out books by sort of social justice warrior authors that see racism in everything. And then they're like, oh, yes, perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And in reality, it's like all they're doing is trying to confirm their biases instead of trying to analyze any of this critically. And they miss important things. For example, that, people were using the word race, like, longer than before, like black and white people were like a concept that existed hundreds of years ago. Right. But like people were using the word race in the way most people would, who are familiar with the term, would think of like ethnicity. They weren't thinking of like the Mongoloid race, the the Negroid or the Australioid or that sort of stuff. They weren't thinking on those terms. It'd be like the Irish race,
right.
In Spanish, in Spanish, it originally referred to horses, to like breeds of horses and cattle. Right. Then it was later then applied to people, and it was applied as a negative thing, like when you talked about the race of a human, like it was something. And this is not like progressive modern Spanish. This is like old timey Spanish when they started to like apply the word race to
just
human
like
beings.
Spanish, old Spanish.
Yeah, like archaic Spanish.
It was to kind of understand what you're saying. What Jared is doing is that he's doing both a retcon and a sleight of hand. Right. So okay.
Right.
Well, what I wanted to add was it was offensive to people when this word came into usage because you were kind of equating human beings to animals, as if you were like establishing a pedigree or a breed out of them. It was dehumanizing. So it was kind of seen as like an improper word. But nations, ethnos, has always existed, and they're usually tied to patriarchs, right? Like in the Bible.
Yes.
People who descended from a certain man were known as a certain race, as a certain nation, an ethnos.
Well, Noel, I was going to say this in most societies in the past, like people weren't taking DNA tests to determine what they were. It was kind of like in most societies, you were the seed of your father. Now, there were some matriarchal societies that operated, more Your mother is what determines your ethnicity.
Yeah.
But usually it was your father in most situations that we're talking about here. It wasn't what percentage you are of this race. That wasn't how people ever saw it for the most part.
Sure. And there's a couple good videos that I would recommend to the audience. If you YouTube like race in the Roman Empire, it's really interesting. It's like a cartoon type of explaining video. Then there's another one about like blacks in the Roman Empire, which kind of touches on the same themes. But it's interesting to tap into how the ancients saw it, right? And it's like, dude, physical differences exist. Like that's fucking obvious. That exists within siblings, right? It's like little kids look at each other and they're like, oh wow, you have two eyes and a nose, and then oh wow, that man's black and that man's hair is like this and that man's eyes are like this. Like this is just, and that guy has blue eyes and
Yeah.
Eyes. Like, yeah, people always notice physical differences, but what told people who they really were, especially when they kind of looked more or less alike, or they could, was like their language, their mannerisms, their costume, their religion, all these things that moderns in a sense have replaced with consumerism. Ancients had an ethnic culture that determined who you were. And yes, you could have a tribe that looked a certain way, like the stereotype of that tribe looked a certain way. And maybe when they were like raiding, they like adopted a little baby of a tribe that looked a different way. But that baby came up in that tribe, and it was just a matter. You know what I'm saying? It's like this is what humans do.
Yeah.
Dogs do this, like cats do this with different animals, even. Like,
but we gotta let Jared keep talking because we're gonna like.
Let me just say real quickly though, just because Marcus isn't here, and I think this is important. So he's told me before that like he was going through like when he was at university, he was going through like the diary of this one Roman emperor. I forget the name, but that's beside the point. But the point is that like in the diary he mentions that people would tease him because he looked unusual for a Roman. Like he was very blonde, he had like colored eyes. People would be like, oh, this guy looks like, one of those Germanic barbarians. And it was like, that's the sort of thing that you'd see where like people would poke fun of how you look. But at the end of the day, it was more the sort of culture that you grew up with and the Roman citizenship that you had over, what your blood quantum levels are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, hold up. So you be saying us Nordic people weren't Romans, man?
I don't know, man. I believe what you want.
All right, let's go.
Let's hit it.
Passage that appears on page 148. There's a long-standing tradition in Greek and Latin literature of idealizing the concepts of unmixed origin, pure lineage, and autochthony. That means belonging to the land, having been the first people there. This entails explicit statements that intermarriage between peoples produces descendants of inferior quality, physical, mental, and moral, while consistent marriage between men and women belonging to the same people will result in superior human beings. The quality of an entire people is determined by lineage and origin only and will be stable if protected against foreign contamination. And further, autochthony assumes a physical relationship between man and land, which by definition turns an immigrant or descendant of an immigrant into an inferior being. This is a very harsh statement about biological differences. It does not use the word race, but it clearly is an understanding that...
And what, like, again, just keep in mind, they weren't thinking in biological terms. They weren't thinking like Jared Taylor was thinking. They had no access to biological facts or biological science or biology or genetic science. These were all heuristics that were applied to basically politics. And by what I mean by politics is not, again, it's not modern democratic party politics. It's like the handling of the public thing. Okay, so it's like, yeah, you don't want to mix with somebody from outside your political environment because they might be a traitor. They might not. You don't know what's out there. It wasn't biological essentialism. This is the sleight of hand that people like Jared Taylor do. People of the past did not think in biological terms. Biology is only 200 years old at most. They were thinking in political, socio-political, and religious terms. The outsider was the guy that was from outside your polity.
Yo, Tercio. So basically, you're telling me that these med guys, they were being told by the emperor, like, even back then, they were like, "Yo, don't be out here with these white women, because y'all don't know how they be."
Yeah, these are all heuristics for the regular people. It's like, yeah, you want to protect your own little clan, your own little tribe, your own little polity, but again, like this gives the impression as if everybody in the past was like a biological essentialist, ethno-nationalist.
And it's like, no, the rule for the past and even for the present is that you have empires and that you have like multi-ethnic political establishments. And then what you want to do is like, you want to, again, like this is speaking from the
It's more
perspective
like,
of the people back then. It's political. It's political. It's
but
not
it's very
biological.
practical. It's like men, like you're gonna want to think that all the kids your wife is supplying you with are yours. Like, you know, people, an ethnos is a family of families, right? It's you got one family, you got a family of related families as a tribe, you got a family of tribes, you create a nation, an ethnos. So you know these differences did exist, but my question is like, okay, what's your point? Like, we understand that biological differences exist, that different groups of people exist. I don't understand why that's like. Don't we already know that? Why does he keep repeating himself?
No, so this is the thing. So this is the thing. It's like people like Jared Taylor and people like Ryan Falk or Falk or Sean Last and the early days of the alt-right. What they would do is like they would basically like just blitzkrieg you with a bunch of like facts about biology, but it's like those facts are only or those, yeah, let's call them facts. We're not even going to dispute the biology here. We're not going to go the kraut route of like, no, it's like, yeah, even if all you're saying it's 100% true, it's like it's still irrelevant because it only works to with like liberal Americans or race blind Americans that have been brainwashed into thinking that we're all equal, there's no differences, there's just one race, the human race or whatever, that kind of like race blind nonsense. Okay. And so that only is useful if you want to kind of like slap the race blind American, the race blind gringo into like, no, dude, like, realize that people are indeed different. There are differences. For us that we're Hispanic and we've always known that, we might have forgotten a little bit maybe if we lived in the United States. I know I did. I was very impressed at first with this, but then I remember like, hey, wait a second, I've always known that people are different, like groups are different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely irrelevant. It's like so
My
much precision. It's like, yeah, I already know. Like you don't have to
it's
show me a genetic distribution of genes to know that Asian people are different from Germans.
Well, I want to just say this real quickly before we continue.
real quick.
Sorry.
Like my question is like, and then what? Like, did you know black people have kinky hair? And I'm like, yeah, nigga, what's your point? And then what? Like, okay, they may have a predisposition for this, or these other people may have a predisposition for that. Like, there's stereotypes. Like, all these things exist. They're real. And then what? What's your fucking point from that point? It's like I don't. Where is it leading me to? Once we realize that, is there more to a human than his flesh?
Right. And I want to say this too, real quickly, is that like, I don't like using the argument that like race is just a social construct, because there's a lot of important things in life that are social constructs and you can't just like wave it away. But at the same time, Jared does this shifty thing, and you're going to see it more prominently as we watch this, where he doesn't ever want to like look into intrinsic, noticeable differences that can be studied in like, different ethnic groups that supposedly belong to the same race. He wants to lump all of these people, from Norway to Bosnia as like, the exact same sort of people with very few differences, when you can actually get a lot more insight into these actual differences when you study these different ethnicities. And there was once a time, as I said before, where these different ethnicities were just called different races. But yeah, sorry, just wanted to put that in there.
Okay, let's keep going.
Wait a second. I think Marcus is back.
Yeah, he is.
So we're talking about antiquity.
I think Marcus, did you miss the little part? I know you had to go do some things.
I missed about like 7 minutes of it. Yeah.
All good. I don't know if you have anything to share, or can we just keep going?
We were talking about antiquity and how they viewed race, because Jared starts with that.
Yeah, I mean it's I guess this is on my alley a little bit. So the Romans in the beginning, right? You would call them more ethnocentric rather than racist, right? So they saw, say, the Latin tribes that lived 10 miles down the road, spoke the same language, had the same gods, same culture. They would call them subhuman in the earliest writings we have, right, from the Roman Republic. And over time, they evolved. They became able to absorb other people into Romanness, right? So by the height of the empire, you could have an emperor that was from, say, Syria or somewhere in the northern part of the Balkans, or eventually you had more Germanic tribes running the military and eventually marrying into the royal families.
Right.
They didn't see race from the Anglo perspective. It really is much more similar to the Hispanic way of seeing race. I think the Spaniards inherited that. What we see today, the racism that, say, someone like Jared Taylor or your average white nationalist has, it's a relatively new invention. It's not anything based in antiquity. I mean, you can go through any ancient writing and you will never see. They'll note, like, hey, a Nubian looks different. It's interesting. He's coal black and the sun doesn't seem to hurt him. Something like that.
Right.
Or they talk about the Germanic tribes being blonde and blue eyed or whatever, red hair. Uh, but they didn't see it as something to look at them as lesser than or greater than. That wasn't a thing
Well, not
until.
only that, but like notice how Jared Taylor also will not like cite how, for example, how the actual Marcus Cicero wrote about how like he just viewed like the British people as just completely subhuman as well and like impossible to train.
Yeah, the exact quote I think is the Britons are so stupid they're not capable of reading and writing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
They're in
like,
mud bogs all day. Or
yeah,
something.
naked, eating each other, running around in bogs, sacrificing people to their gods,
Just
nailing
blonde
people.
indios.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note that the ancient Greeks, had a concept of kind of three basic races. If you wanted to, kind of fall into that, they describe people as being, and I think the ancients also understood these biological differences in appearance as like a difference in complexion, but not necessarily in essence, right? Like,
Yeah.
does that make sense? But the Greeks said that there was three complexions of people. There was Ethiopians, which means burnt skin, right? So basically everybody who's dark, south of kind of where the Greeks were. Then there's white people, or what translate into white, but this didn't include like Europe per se. This, for example, wouldn't have included like blonde people or fair-skinned people. They would have described those people as part of the yellow race. So like, Nordics wouldn't have been considered whites by the Greeks, but like Phoenicians and Hebrews would have, right? People of like the Near East or the Mediterranean would have been considered white, but people at a higher latitude, in a sense, the lighter people, really fair-skinned people, wouldn't have been considered white. So you see how, it's like you said, these categories exist, but they exist only in the mind. And I think E. Michael Jones granted that. So it's like you can't build immutable truths out of it. They may help you kind of measure something, but that's not necessarily giving you a universal of human.
But also note how it goes against what Jared Taylor wants to preach, that there's one, like, he wants to establish two things: that race is real and that the white race is race. But if you go to antiquity, it's like, okay, we can grant you, being generous. Okay, the ancients thought race was real, but they did not think the white race was real. They did not think that. They saw every distinct group in Europe as their own thing, their own race. Right. So it's like you cannot prove both at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, if you go back, like if you look at like Cato, right, famous Roman, he lived around the time of Caesar. They were enemies. They hated each other their whole careers. And one of Caesar's favorite insults was he would say that Cato was the grandson of a barbarian, that either his grandfather had been messing around with the Celtic slaves, or his grandmother had gotten knocked up by a slave and cucked the grandfather. Right, that was his biggest insult, because he had reddish hair and very light skin that would burn in the summertime in Rome. I mean, they didn't see whiteness as anything superior if they had an understanding of it at all. You go to a slave plantation in ancient Rome, you'd see dark-skinned people working. You'd see light-skinned people working, probably more light-skinned because they're usually prisoners of war. And the plantation was probably run by a fairly dark-skinned, dark-haired, dark-eyed Italian person, right?
Right.
Latin person, a Roman. They didn't see race didn't make a difference with slavery or freedom or wealth or anything like that.
Right. So yeah, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Good to know these
An
things.
understanding that human groups are different. These biological differences have significance. And you will find statements like this throughout antiquity. And I will quote you simply just one, and this from an Arab, neither a Greek nor a Latin. This is from Ibn Khaldun. He writes another harsh thing. The Negro nations are, as a rule, submissive to slavery because Negroes have little that is essentially human and have attributes that are quite similar to those of dumb animals. Again, an exceedingly harsh statement, but it's out of the mouth of Ibn Khaldun, the 14th century philosopher who's considered one of the great thinkers of the Middle Ages, born and lived in Tunis, North Africa. I don't wish to over-exaggerate the fact of African and non-African differences. I would like to point out that Asians, when they encountered Caucasians, they were likewise struck by how different they were physically and temperamentally. As probably some of you know, Japan was locked up for 300 years in a system known as sakoku. And in the 19th century, when the Americans came along and opened up the country, they were quite an astonishing phenomenon to the Japanese. Here is an artist's depiction of an American by a Japanese in the late 1860s. As you can see, this artist is struck by the differences.
Can you pause it? I'm sorry, I have to pause this one because this is
Pretty accurate.
This is what I'm talking about the self-owned. Hold on, Klaus? Can you pull up that picture?
He looks white to me.
I don't have it on me, but if you have your Telegram, you can just kind of go into that, and then we can.
I do. This is like.
So let me stop.
This is the
biggest. Let me stop sharing, and then you can share your stuff.
This is the biggest cell phone that anybody could have done. When I saw it, dude, that was the first thing I had to screenshot and pause, and I'm like, "Is this really how the Japanese saw the Americans? Like, is this guy?" And then the rest of the debate pretty much just is a repeat of this part. It just confirms exactly what we've been saying, that to blame the Jays by themselves, and we'll get into it because I feel like E. Michael Jones does that a lot, but to not see the collusion, the partnering with the A's is very foolish. Man, I'm trying to pull that picture up. Here it is.
Okay.
Man, sorry, you guys. Well, you go ahead. Say what you were gonna say.
No, I was just gonna be like, if you don't have it with you, we'll just continue with the thing, and once you have it, you can share it with the audience.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And real quick, I just wanted to say, just to point out again, like, yes, he points out that North African writing that about, I'm assuming, some tribe of sub-Saharans that he found. Funny how he never picks, for example, like, the Baghdadi scholar that visited the Nordic countries and said very similar things.
Or what St. Patrick himself said about the Irish when he was trying to go to convert them to Christianity. I mean, he basically was ready to turn around and go back home. He almost said that these people aren't worth Christianizing. They're so subhuman.
Well, what can you explain why? Like, weren't they eating each other?
He said they were running around naked. They'd have sex in the open. Someone could drop dead in the middle of the road, and they just keep walking by them, not even pay attention. Cannibalism. They weren't even able to master, say, basic things like not catching your hut on fire when you're cooking.
Wait a second. Hold on. So the Afrocentrists are right. They was Kangs.
We was Irish.
They was Europeans. They was Europeans.
Yeah, so basically these were like white Africans, as we would imagine, in a denigrating term. These kind of undeveloped people who are still living in the Stone Age and like smell their fingers after they scratch their butts.
Yeah.
I mean, the Romans said the same thing about the Germans. They would just take prisoners and nail them to trees because they thought the trees were their gods.
I wonder why we never hear that from these people when they're trying to prove racist right. I wonder why they always pick the poor black people.
No infighting, Tercio. No infighting. We know we can't have that.
That's right. No, we're all one people. That's right.
We're white now. Hold on.
Mud hut dwelling, cannibalizing, hut burning people.
I found the image finally. So, I mean, this was the biggest self-own that Jared Taylor does. And again, you'll notice that he pretty much does this the entire time. And E. Michael Jones just pounces on him for it.
What's happening?
There it is.
Oh.
So we've all seen we've all seen this meme, right? The greedy merchant, and here's a British one. And then look at how the Japanese depicted the American. And this guy is using this as evidence to see they notice race. I think what the Japanese was notice the demon inside these people. I don't know if you guys believe in demons, but you know, they take over the contours of your face. And it seems to me like the Japanese hit the nail right on the head.
I mean,
let's keep
no, go ahead.
これはです。これはですと white people that is that white to pig. That was a white to pig back then. All right, let's keep going.
Between his people and these aliens, these physical astonishing differences. Of course, now that modern era, we have far more scientific ways of evaluating and detecting these differences. Here is a scatter plot of something called a principal components analysis. As you can see along the right-hand side, top to bottom, these are geographical areas that are distinguished genetically, mind you, and in different colors. And although it is top to bottom on this graph, we are traveling east to west. And as you can see, it starts with East Asians who are blue. Then we get Polynesians, Americans, this is Amerindians, Central Asian, all the way out to Europe. This is an analysis of the actual genes of people, and it lines up perfectly with what we understand their origins and their geographical locations to be. Africans are way out here on the left because they are genetically so different from people who are
Again with the Africans. Oh my God.
Wait, so from what I'm seeing on this graph, there seems to be a bit of like a funny thing going on here. You see how West Asia and Europe kind of interlapped quite a bit? So, I mean, I don't know if this assumes that Turkey is being filled with Turks or whatever. I'm not exactly sure what this means. But would this not assume that therefore Arabs are white and Assyrians and Kurds and
don't look at it too much. No, don't think about it. It's just everybody's different. Like there's nobody's touching.
Because at that point they're white. That's kind of what Jared is implying here.
Well, maybe
so I've seen this graph before. He must have just pulled it up. I think it's one that goes around Wignat circles, right? It's been around for probably 20 years. It's wrong. It's. I think the original was actually photoshopped. Because if you scroll up, like if you zoom in, right, if you see between Central Asia and Europe, right, where are the dots that would show a continuous genetic exchange between the different groups, right? I mean, once you get into like East into Slavland and keep going a little further, you're going to find Eurasian people, right?
Eastern mestizos, basically.
Basically, yeah, literally. I mean, I'm 8% Central Asian. The groups interchange. They intermixed.
White, dude. You're a Slav. You're an Asiatic Slav, and you're not white.
I'm literally a Bolshevik. I'm the Bolshevik horde. Yes, and I married an Anglo woman.
You're an associate white. You're not partner in the
junior partner. No, I just want to say like forget about this being wrong. Let's say it's 100% right. Like I don't care. Like this definitely shows scientifically with scientific precision.
More data.
Yeah, my data. Like I'm granting him the data. I don't want to argue data. Data is for nerds. It's boring. Okay. And he's just telling us, like he's not. But wait. He is saying he's saying that this data does not tell us anything new, because he already argued that everybody in the past basically already knew what this genetic graph shows, and now we just simply have the tools to sort of like confirm it and have very precise knowledge. So it's like, so what's the point of the graph? You know, it's like, okay, it's very precise and everything, but it's just data, and you're telling us everybody already knew about this. This is just more precise. What's your plan with, like, what do you want to do with this data? Well, that's the question he never answers.
But this is sophistry. Like Brianna asked, what's this supposed to represent? It doesn't matter. You have to understand that data is very easy to manipulate. There's a famous book called How to Lie with Statistics. Like I can extrapolate data about anything and I can make an infographic out of the data to basically show any agenda that I want to push.
But it doesn't.
Right?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We don't. We don't even have to argue that he's lying. The question I want to ask Jared Taylor is, what do we do with this scientific knowledge that you're presenting to us? It's like
Nothing.
you're telling me ancient civilization, like everybody before us, already knew with this, and they had a deal. You know, they had different things that they did to handle these differences, whether it was integration, segregation, separation, whatever. We had political measures to handle different groups. This data is not proving now, you know, after thousands of years of civilization where we all thought there was one race and we were all the same. It's now finally like science disproved that. It's like, no, it's like, okay, it's more precise knowledge.
Everybody already
exactly. So this is already, everybody already knew this, but this is just more precise. Okay, Jared Taylor, what do you want to do with this data? What's your plan? Because you never talk about what this data, you can never derive an is or an odd from an is. This is just an is. Okay. So what is your odd, Jared Taylor? You see this graph, and what do you think the political actions of the governments of the world should be? Should we all, like, you know, stay in our country? Like, do you want to kick blacks out of the United States? Do you want to give them their own nation? What is derived from this data, from your science? He never, like, what's the point? Like, that's the question. What do you want to do? What's the plan?
Right.
Well, to provide a devil's advocate, so this data would confirm that this cluster over here, Europeans, are so dissimilar to this cluster over here, Africans, that them two living side by side is going to create ethno-racial tensions. And so for the benefit of everyone involved, they should separate and form their own communities. Now, I don't know if Jared himself engages in this argument. I'm sure he does. But that's kind of like the white nationalist standard talking.
He claims
point.
to be pro freedom of association. He wants like covenant communities, essentially. That's what he advocates for.
So libertarianism?
Basically. Yeah, he's a racist liberal. We've been over this.
But I mean, this is what I don't understand about the US. Like, dude, I have cousins who are very light skinned. I have cousins who are more on the dark end. And like, you know, I have a cousin who's very light and he likes light girls, and he got with a light girl, and like the white race, my cousin wouldn't know that he was a white race. He thought he was Nicaraguan. Is going to be preserved, and like the dark one likes darker girls, and some of the guys in the middle like girls in the middle, and they like white girls, and they like dark. It's like it like, okay, you know what I'm saying? It's like, who cares?
Yeah,
bro?
yeah, exactly. It's irrelevant.
Fuck and move on with your life. Like, what different? What I don't. Yeah, my question is, what's the fucking point of it? But I want specifically, like, dude, notice the nerdiness of the white dude. Like, let me pull out my graph to like show something. But it's like, dude, I could have pulled data and made a graph say anything. It's like, you know what I think about dudes like this? Like when they sleep with a woman and the woman doesn't climax, and the woman and he asks her, hey, did you climax? She's like, no. And he's like, are you sure? Because I recorded this, and here's the graph that shows. And he's gonna like convince her that she climaxed using graphs and shit. And it's like, no.
At the 20-minute mark, I observed that your beats per minute increased to a peak of 122 beats per minute. So I think you actually did. It might be.
and then they'll cap out with, oh, that's a myth, and that doesn't really happen, and that's part of the Negro media. Whatever.
It's like I said, this is only good. Like the only utility for this, like being charitable, is to convince like race blind Americans that think that there's no different. Like we're all, you know, tabula rasa. Everybody's the same. Everything's environment 100%. It's like, yeah, this only works for that. Yeah. We've already, like, once you move past that and we just go and like, yeah, Jared, like, okay, races are real. Like people are different. But we now live together. The world is interconnected. Different parts of the world have been interconnected since a long time. So we've known how to, you know, we've developed different
around those things for, you know, millennia, dude.
Millennia, exactly. We've been developing strategies on how to deal with this for millennia. So what's your new what's new for you? Like what are you suggesting that hasn't been done in 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years? Like what's the plan? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm already on board. Yeah, blacks are different from Chinese people. Yes. Okay. Go. What do you want to do?
All right, let's go.
I would add that these principal component analyses can make very fine distinctions between even smaller groups within races. Here you can see East Asians, Southeast Asians, Pakistanis, also Indians. And if you notice here, Indian Brahmins here on the left, you can see in dark blue, as opposed to Indian lower caste. These are people who've been living side by side for a millennia, and yet they have remained so genetically distinct through the caste system that principal components analysis can distinguish them essentially unerringly. Now, this principal components analysis is something that we associate with very sophisticated genetic analysis, but for just $100, 23andMe will tell you in a very fine-grained way what your genetic heritage is. This is 23andMe's principal components map that plots out the different European groups according to where they live.
I just sent you a pin in Telegram. If you see it, play that voice message. Somebody's got to mute their mic.
Yeah.
That voice message, this voice message that we're about to play, you guys, is a response to this part by Fascifist, who's a Swiss of Indian ancestry from India, and so he kind of breaks down what he was talking about. Look at the high caste and the low caste. Go ahead, if you can play that.
Wait, because I don't know how to play it from like my
I can
phone.
do it. I can do it right now. Just let me do it.
Oh,
Also,
okay.
Klaus, put the video like full screen for the audience.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. This is Klaus's first day as engineer, and as you can see, he's not doing too well.
All right,
Well,
let me just
just fucking with you.
All right, I'll play it right now. Just listen,
I appreciate
everybody.
Go ahead, Billy.
This graph here is actually extremely misleading because the blue here that is labeled Indian Brahmin and the green here that is labeled Indian lower caste seems to imply that Brahmins and lower castes are two separate ethnic groups, as if Brahmins are an ethnicity. Brahmins are not an ethnicity. The other castes, the lower castes, are not an ethnicity. Kshatriya is not an ethnicity. Shudra is not an ethnicity. It's a class, not an ethnic group. Okay, this is very important to understand. So to label the blue here Indian Brahmin and to label the green there Indian lower caste is dishonest, because what's actually being shown there is North Indians for blue and South Indians for green. It has nothing to do with being a Brahmin or being any caste at all. That's a very important distinction. Why? Because there are Brahmins in South India. There are Kshatriyas and Brahmins everywhere in India. There are lower caste people in North India too. There's Shudras in North India. It's not like all of North India is just Brahmins and Kshatriyas, and all of South India are just Shudras and Vaishyas. That's clearly not the case. Again, because Brahmin is not an ethnic identity. Brahmin is a class designation. It is an economic class designation. And to prove this, I will read the following. It says, in the early Indian society of the Vedic era, classification was actually based on merit rather than birth. This was called the Varna system. Society was classified into the priests and scholars called Brahmins, the warriors called Kshatriyas, the traders called Vaishyas, and the working class called Shudras. This was never a rigid system. For example, a Shudra could easily become a Brahmin when he became a scholar, or a Brahmin could easily be called a Kshatriya if he took up arms to do battle or wage war. The Varna system, in truth, was always a system of dividing labor. Problems arose only once the Varna system became rigid and turned into the Jat system, or what modernists colloquially refer to as the caste system today. While there is no mention of such a system in the earliest scriptures like the Vedas or the Gita, later scriptures, including some Puranas, are abound in information about it. So while on the one hand you have the Rig Veda saying everyone, whether Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, should be taught the Vedas, later scriptures prohibit it and often cruelly enforce the restrictions. Now, important to remember is that only the Vedas have ever been revealed as divinely inspired to the ancient scholar. This attribute is never granted to any and all latter scriptures. This implies that the latter scriptures were the result of human innovations and modernizations, and in fact misrepresentations, whereas only the Vedas were considered to be of a divine origin. And if you guys are interested in more about that, you can read The Divine Vedas by Sanjeev Newar. But the point here being is that the original Varna system purely describes class distinctions economically, and it is in fact a system of dividing labor. It's not describing ethnic groups whatsoever. So in conclusion, again, with the graph there, that the blue should be labeled North Indian, the green should be labeled South Indian. It has nothing to do with caste. It has nothing to do with Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Shudras. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. There are Brahmins in the green and there are Brahmins in the blue. There are Shudras in the green and there are Shudras in the blue. It's just distinguishing North and South Indians, not castes.
All right, so that was an audio from the Fascifist, and he does have a YouTube channel, so if you guys can give him a follow, I think Billy will be able to link that up in the comments if you want to know more about this type of stuff. And yeah, so there was a mistaken nomenclature there. So as he said, the blue one over there should be Indo-Aryan Indians, which would be in the north, and the people in the green should be the Dravidians, which are in the south of India. All right.
But listen, like, look at this. What uber racist Jared Taylor confused ethnicity, class, and race in this instance. What does that tell you about the concept of race? Like, it's so easily interchangeable that even super racist guy, that racist for a living, Jared Taylor, can get confused.
All right, let's keep going.
Analysis, but for just $100, 23andMe will tell you in a very fine-grained way what your genetic heritage is. This is 23andMe's principal components map that plots out the different European groups according to where they live, simply by distinguishing between them on the basis of a cheap, very inexpensive genetic test. So you have Bulgarians, Denmarks, Druze, Finnish, French. You have all of these different people who are distinguished unerringly by the genes that they carry within themselves. And this is, as I say, so clear and so distinctive that if, for example, you were to send in your DNA to 23andMe, and imagine that you came back with results like this. Here is someone that 23andMe determined was 100% Northwestern European, 94% British Isles, a little bit French and German, and the rest unquestionably Northwestern European. This happens to be a person whose ancestors came to the United States over 300 years ago, but the genetics remain what they were, and they reflect the nature of this person. This person cannot but be a white person. A white person, his genes say so, his appearance says so, and this is not some kind of fiction or some kind of optical illusion.
Pause it. I mean, this is stupid. Do we not know white people that act like black people? We never met. Like, there was like a video that's going viral, the Hoff twins. It's like, you guys should watch it. It's fucking hilarious. It's these two white twins who grew up in the ghetto in the Bay Area. And they're like, they live in the projects with all the blacks. And they're like black. Like, they're part of the black community. Like, they're ethnically black. And he's saying, like, a white person doesn't have the choice. Like, he looks at humans like a robot that's programmed by DNA and like has no autonomy.
That's right.
Well, his argument is that all the non-whites see a white person and they just have this like fantasy of just like killing them in their sleep or something.
When Eminem first came out, did you see a white person? Or did you see like a white and Hardy R?
Well, I mean, it's like people like Jared Taylor. They think that genetics influence culture 100%. Like it's irreversible. You can't change it. But then like you have the stories of, say, Alexander the Great, right? He made it all the way into Asia, right? And after he died, you had a lot of Greeks that stayed. They married local women. They didn't. They brought in their own women and they adjusted into society. You had Greeks in Afghanistan for hundreds of years. They learned the local languages. They ended up converting to Buddhism. I mean, you can still see their statues and their coins, right? With have their face, and on the other side will be a thing of the Buddha. They were culturally Central Asian or Indian subcontinent. They had forgotten Greek. They had forgotten everything about their past. Their culture had completely shifted. Their genetics might not have shifted for a while, but someone like Jared Taylor would say, no, 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 no. It has to stay the same. It has to stay the same forever and ever and ever. Like he doesn't. People like they're too rigid in how they think.
Not only that, he wants to ascribe like some sort of essence to the genes. Like they mix like materialism with like spiritual things, because he's basically arguing that there's like this Northwestern European essence that is transmitted through the genes. And it's like, again, he's taking, like, he's not taking history into consideration. He's just looking at everything as like a slideshow or like discrete instances of things. And it's like, well, you mean like a Northwestern European from 2020, or a Northwestern European from 500 years ago, or a Northwestern European from 3000 BC? It's like, are those like, do they carry the exact same thing? If it's the exact same thing, where the hell were Northwestern Europeans 3,000 years ago? Where were they? Why weren't they the chief of industry and like the chiefs of civilization like they are now? So it's like, if you're ascribing this essential like this inherent thing, like, oh, this person cannot be anything but this Northwestern European, and implied in that is that they're good, polite, hardworking, whatever, productive, not criminal, all this bunch of good stuff that they want to ascribe to the white race. They never want to ascribe anything negative. Like, even, well, we can get into that later. Even when they want to try to see put like a negative, it's something like, we're too good, like
we're too nice.
Yeah, we're too nice.
Crime is that I'm too good of a girlfriend and takes advantage of me. Fucking faggots, dog. Oh Lord!
So like at a job interview, what's your biggest weakness? I work too hard, man. Like I'm just in it for the company so much. Like I can be too productive sometimes.
My graph's too good.
So yeah, it's like, okay, so what's the essence of a Northwestern European? Like, what time frame are we talking about? Last 50 years, like last 100 years, last 3,000 years?
This is essentially Calvinism, correct? I don't know too much about Calvinism,
but yeah, biological Calvinism.
Yeah. Biological determinism. Calvinism is basically that, like, spiritually, I guess.
I mean, with Calvinism is that Calvin thought that there was, like, you had no choice in being saved, like God just elected you.
Right, exactly.
And
predestination,
so, yeah, predestination. You were predestined by God to be saved or not. So like, I don't even understand why people are Calvinists. It's like, you have no choice. It's like, why even bother? That doesn't matter what you do.
Isn't that like Islam?
No. With Islam, like, no. With Islam, there's works.
But it isn't like everything written, mashallah.
I mean, we gotta make a distinction here, which is theological distinction, is that we humans can't do anything to be saved, in the sense that we cannot earn grace through our good behavior. So it, like, grace is extended to us, but it's not like God pre-chooses us or predetermines who's going to save or who's not. He extends his grace to everybody, and then we have the choice to grab onto it. Yeah, exactly, to grab onto it or not. But there's nothing inherent in us that we can do to earn salvation. So it's only through grace. But Calvinism is not that. Calvinism is, not only don't you do not have nothing inherent in you to earn salvation, you don't even get a choice. It's God that saves you. Like, it's already predetermined.
Yeah, basically. So it's like what the Jews thought of themselves when Christ came. They thought they were just like born with it, and they couldn't.
Yes,
it's also. Yeah, you could also argue that it's a form of like Judaism, where they just think they're the elected people no matter what.
I see that. I see that. Okay, let's keep it rolling.
Point out that it is a surprise to many people to realize that the races can be distinguished quite accurately by the microbes that choose to live in your mouth. This is a study called Oral Bacteria Create a Fingerprint in Your Mouth. What this found was researchers found that each genetic group in the study was represented by a signature of shared microbial communities. They say each ethnic group, but they're really talking about blacks, whites, Chinese, and Latinos. It goes on to say, this is the first time it's been shown that ethnicity, what they're really talking about is biology, is a huge component in determining what you carry in your mouth. So these microbes, these are people living in the same country, probably eating essentially the same diet, but the microbes can tell them apart. For the microbes, this is not a fiction. This is an important question of where they are going to live. Now, here is another interesting headline. This babies are racist, which is
Hold up before we get
fucking
into
guy.
that. But Latino is a very broad term, so we don't know what that refers to in that study. It could refer strictly to mestizos. It could refer to mulattoes. It could refer to castizos. So already by that, I'm starting to doubt. Maybe not the truth of that study, but there is a data set that might kind of disrupt the whole thing. I don't know what they mean by Latinos in that study.
Dude, I don't even trust any studies with the
Right,
replication science. It's like who even knows if this is true? It's like just,
Well, I
just
mean,
some
dude, people smell different. Like I grew up, with friends of different races. Like if I went into an Asian person's house, like my Vietnamese homie's house was guaranteed to smell like shrimp, because like they be cooking shrimp all fucking day, and like they didn't necessarily like to open their windows. You go to a Mexican dude's house, probably smells like refried beans if they don't open the windows. My house smells like fine tobacco, incense, fresh linen, handsome people. If you come into my house, that's what it smells like. But it's like, yeah, I get it. Like people have scents and smells. Like what's the point? Like people from the Middle East kind of have a spiciness to them and a musk. And
Well, I
amber-
mean, it's like the Asians always say that white people or European people smell like milk. They always say that, right?
Right.
And then you have people like me that say, like, when you go into Matt Parrott's trailer park, it smells like meth. I mean,
listen.
If you go to your nigga's house, it probably smells like blunts, bro.
Oh yes, bro. I'm telling you, black people have the fucking blunt smell everywhere I go. It's crazy. Like it's always backwoods and like kind of mid sometimes. Sometimes they do smell like dank, but it's mostly mids.
All I know is we're gonna send the mouth bacteria Gestapo to figure out what race you are and deport you. That's all I'm hearing.
Slayer's gonna lead this effort.
He's gonna register. When they taste his mouth, he's gonna register as black because all the blunts in the Colt 45s.
Bro,
Imagine
they're gonna find pupusas in his oral bacteria, and at that point he's fucking gone, bro. He ain't no white after that.
Imagine like having to like swab somebody's mouth to analyze their bacteria to know if they're from your tribe.
It's so erotic to me.
well,
Dog.
I mean, so would most Wignats, would a good portion of Wignats be part of like the semen tribe? Because if you swab their mouths, you're gonna find.
Oh my god, so uncharitable. But yeah, it's like I don't like again like what do we do with this information? Like we already agree with you, Jared. Like people are different. Like yeah, you could tell them apart by looking at them or by different tests. What do we want to do with? Do we want to test people? How do we test them? What do you want to do with Jared?
It reminds me of Dave Chappelle's skit when he's a black white supremacist, and he's like, "Y'all stink, y'all stink." Like that. Come on, dog. Okay, getting childish, dog. Anyways, let's keep going. Babies are
use of the word racist, which is always pejorative. But as you see in the highlighted text at the bottom, this study found that babies often develop a preference by the age of 3 months. This is before they can even talk. This is certainly before they can tell fiction from nonfiction. This is certainly before they would be human beings who care about social constructs at all. They can tell race because race is real. Race is something they notice, and it is by no means something that is insignificant in their own lives. I would go on to point out that race is a very important distinguisher in the terms of disease. Different racial groups have vastly different rates of certain kinds of diseases. Cystic fibrosis, for example, is vastly more common among whites than of any other racial group. And every race has diseases that it is more likely to suffer from. Blacks, for example, have much higher rates of prostate.
Is Jared Taylor homosexual? Does he have children?
No, yeah, he has children. Yeah, he has.
Is he a
He has
cousin?
grandchildren. Even.
The way he accentuates when he talks.
He's just a very educated person.
That's just aristocratic Anglo talk.
Yeah.
It reminds me of there's a Angelo does a really good job. I hope Angelo shows up. There's a King of the Hill episode where like they go visit like Southern aristocrats that were like they're faintly related to in Louisiana. He kind of sounds like Big Papa in Django, but he's like gay and he's just very kind of flamboyant, you know.
No. Jared Taylor's not gay. He's just
an Anglo. He's not gay.
He's just an Anglo.
Good.
He's
I
just
have
an
a
Anglo.
good gaydar, and right now I saw him talking in a way that okay, fine. I'll grant it to him. I'm not gonna beat him in the head with that. But
It doesn't matter.
I want to make a point about babies are racist. It made me think of all the white kids in like the nice part of Orange County and LA County who have basically Guatemalan women raising them. Like these white kids probably end up having a preference for Guatemalan women, you know, because like they are the ones who basically mother them. They don't. These kids. There was a movie I remember with Jim Carrey. I forget what it was called, but he like becomes broke, and his kid was like raised by a Guatemalan woman.
Oh yeah, I know that movie.
Nolly Jane. I forget what it's called, but the kid thinks he's Hispanic.
Fun with Dick and Jane. Fun with Dick and Jane is the movie.
And the kid thinks he's Hispanic, and he's like, no, not my Telemundo, because he grew up Hispanic. Yeah. He didn't grow up white. It's interesting phenomenon.
SpongeBob. He calls SpongeBob Roberto Esponja pantalones cuadrados.
Okay, let's keep it going.
Yo, block Henry Wilson, and can you please full screen, please? Like on your side.
Me? Oh, sorry, sir. Go ahead.
And block Henry Wilson. He's
yeah, I already did.
Cancer than whites. And the genes that account for every bit of this difference have been established. This is not a fiction. And for a doctor to adopt Mr. Jones' point of view and to assume that race is a fiction would be, in my view, malpractice. After all, this article says, what to know about Bidil, the first heart medication marketed specifically for Black patients. It's marketed specifically for Black patients because it works on Blacks and no one else. Again, this is not a fiction. This has to do with chemical pathways and the physiology of different human groups. Ordinarily, this kind of straightforward assertion of the reality of race never occurs in the mainstream media, but occasionally, very occasionally, it sneaks in. Here in the New York Times is an article called How Genetics is Changing Our Understanding of Race. Here, race is in scare quotes, but the text is, and I extracted it here, I'm worried that well-meaning people who deny the possibility of substantial biological differences among human populations are digging themselves into an indefensible position, one that will not survive the onslaught of science. Science tells us race.
So who the fuck denies that there's substantial biological differences amongst human populations?
Gringos, liberal gringos.
I see.
Not even E. Michael Jones denies that.
No.
So from what you're gonna tell on this debate is that the two men are kind of speaking over each other because they're using the same word, but they mean it in different ways. So yes. E. Michael Jones does not deny at all that there are genetic differences between tribes and clusters of human beings. But what he is saying is that as Noel pointed out previously, that ethnicity matters more than race, and it is more easily kind of understandable than race, because as you said previously, if you have this more racialist mindset, then you're going to assume that an Irishman is so similar to a Bosnian that they're essentially the same, which is ludicrous. And even Europeans themselves don't believe that. Even European liberals don't believe that.
Well, Irish and Northern Irish Scotsmen who have a different religion were capping each other not so long ago.
Exactly.
Or like,
So
you know, Bosnians and Serbians who are like genetically the same.
even people like Sargon of Akkad, who was like the archetype of the English liberal, still views himself as an ethnic Englishman. He doesn't believe in this white European sort of unity, and he'll very much mock the French and the Germans. He's like, I don't want those filthy French in my country, and he would rather have black Englishmen in his country than the French and the white French, because he views the French as degenerate and whatever.
It's just that honestly, like the fact that there are differences between human groups, it's so trivial that it's like you're wasting my time with all this science. It's like, this is just for gringos. This is just for people that have been brainwashed into like browbeat into thinking that it's not true. Like literally brainwashing, and now it's like the brainwashing back. It's like so Anglo Americans went from being so racist that when they try to like fix racism, they just went straight to like extreme anti-racism, and the only way to fix it, yeah, and the only way to fix it is like deny the whole thing. And we were talking earlier in like maybe there's good reason that the establishment, in trying to fight racism, made everything, gave no nuance, no opportunity to nuance. Because if you don't, if you allow nuance, or if you allow them the possibility of thinking that, hey, yeah, blacks are different, or a different group, it's just completely possible that Anglo Americans would just slip back into KKK, lynching people, like just going nuts, because they're not able to handle like that, like diversity or that nuance of a group. Yeah,
they have no
so,
chill.
so yeah, they have no chill. So it's like, yeah, they had to make it a taboo so that people wouldn't, like, white people wouldn't be killing the blacks, or whatever, segregating them, or like there was no chance of like having a truly like natural interaction, which is why everything feels so forced in the United States, and like especially when you compare it with racial dynamics in Spanish America, which they were just. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say this, I went to high school in Redondo Beach, and I went to high school in Hawthorne. I went to high school in Inglewood High. Like, I went to all three high schools, so I had friends all over. And to be honest, I feel like America's over it. Like, I do think America got over its racial issues. I would say specifically before, like, I think Dave Chappelle's show and the Bush administration was like an era where people got over race, and it became like something cheeky, right? Like, has anybody noticed black people walk like this and white people? That was like comedy back in the day, right? You remember that? Like, I had friends of different races, and we were friends. Like, we were young kids. We had fun. We used to go to parties. We used to chill. We used to get girls. We used to go cruising, and we would make fun of each other's race, like, constantly, and it was funny. Like, we would always say, like, I'm racist against everybody, even my own people. And so I feel like America, in a way, kind of did get over it. But I honestly believe that during Obama's administration, something alchemical was done in America, and it really targeted Black America, and it like changed Black people. Like, they became sensitive. They became like white women, like white Jewish women is what happened to blacks. When before that, it was niggas versus Black people. And I think a lot of the young guys, maybe these white guys who feel disenfranchised because, they're like, I can get it, like maybe they make white people look bad, and I don't know. So I don't know. I don't pay attention to enough shit to notice, but they've been kind of led to this kind of racism that's just like, it's really a way to communicate their fear of Black people. Like, I grew up in an area where we're not afraid of Black people, right? Like, I'm not afraid of a Black dude walking in front of me. Like, even if he's like from the hood, like, he'll be able to tell by my posturing and my like facial expression that I'm somebody too, and we'll walk civilly past each other. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like these dorky ass repressed suburban kids see a Black dude and they get nervous because they have this like taboo. And then I think there's also a fetish tied to this, which is like, if you look at the pornography, it makes sense. I don't know if I'm just getting too Freudian with it, but I just want to.
No. As a matter of fact, the prime sort of race author right now, which is Robin DiAngelo, literally says that, yeah, I am racist against white people because I have certain conceptions of them that, it was ingrained through the white supremacy or whatever. She's a literal white suburban woman who hasn't met like a Tyrone in the wild, basically. And so obviously before she was unlearning her racism, she would like grab her purse a little tighter when they would, walk past her. So a lot of this is sort of,
Right.
yeah, it's very suburban, sort of white.
Yeah, it's just like this gay nervousness, dude. But there's always a fetish to it. It's like, dude, I remember, man, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I'm just gonna share this one last story. I remember we were in zero period, me and my Vietnamese friend, and we had zero period. We had driver's ed, right? We're trying to get our licenses like 6 months earlier by doing the stupid class zero period. And there was like a video of like risks if you ever get caught like in a situation where like criminals try to take your car, how to deal with it. And it was like a dramatization, right? And there was like this white couple and they stick them in the trunk and these criminals, right? You don't know who they are, but they stick the white couple in the trunk. And this is like an educational video. And the white woman goes like, they're probably going to try to rape me. And if they do, just let them, Bobby. Don't get involved. I'm sorry, dog. Me and my friend looked at each other and were like, what's up with white people, dog? Like, why do they want to get raped? I'm sorry.
It's like if you see like, go back saying like the southern part of the United States, right? Every little like say gain that black people got, right? Like you can go back to say the 30s when Huey Long was governor of Louisiana and he was like, "Hey, I think we need to get textbooks for white kids and black kids because half this state is illiterate and that's disgusting in the 20th century." And the KKK opposed it, and they did this with any little, measure. And they would always say, "Oh, but the blacks are going to rape white women." It was always going back to that. It's like
sexual, yeah.
It's like, or when they integrated the colleges down here, they it's like, why would you have like advisors to George Wallace talking about like, "Oh my God, they're going to rape all the white women." It's like, nobody's raping nobody. Let the little black girl go to school. I mean, for God's sake.
But they're just perverted, there's always like a kinky perversion. And
but even the way they handle integration, it was like forced integration. Like right now, it's like right now we're gonna like the government's gonna put the buses and we're gonna force you. It didn't. They didn't even let them like develop naturally, where it's like maybe you have a couple affluent black people move into the white neighborhood and then they start with the school and stuff. It was like no, right now. Like just screw you. Too heavy-handed, too non-nuanced. It was like I said, like they went from uber racism to uber anti-racism.
Well, it's like it's weird when you're right. Like when they did it, they just the Supreme Court handed down a decision, and nobody seemed to let the feds know. Like, hey, you do realize the Klan is still like huge down in these states, right? Like, and they're going to start blowing stuff up and killing people. And it's like, yeah, they just like missed that point. Like maybe they should have targeted these groups, and maybe like either through education or like, I mean, some of these people are just scum. They should have just been like taken, locked up and bury the key somewhere. But none of that was done. It's like everything was reactive. They forced it and then they just reacted to all the chaos that happened.
Yeah.
It's like we get it. Like it was bad, but at the same time, it's like you probably should have handled some of these grugs. Like they were running around, attacking black preachers, that didn't really do much. Like they were just, walking, some guy try to blow up their house or something. Like that happened in Birmingham a lot.
Yeah. And I think maybe they didn't want it to work, or who knows? Like again, it's just a stupid way to go about it. I don't know if we want to keep digging more into this intro.
Nah.
I
kind of really don't have to.
I wanted basically to add. I think let's look. I want to ask you guys why you think keeps repeating himself and like using these data points to state the obvious. For me, his intention is to say like, look, we're white. And like join like the white card and look at all these data points with pretty colors on it. They show that we're white. And I mean, personally, I believe that white is an Anglo copyright, very much like the West is. And, they use it for politically expedient reasons. And I think one of the things that's kind of happening is I think they're kind of baiting Hispanics with the white card, and Hispanics aren't biting. And then I think the Anglos are looking for troops. And I think, in the case of Marcus, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like let's get the Poles to fill the ranks of whiteness now and have them, be cannon fodder on the front lines for things that they never did. Like, first off, they're Catholic. You get what I'm saying? Like, I think to me, it's an effort to rally the troops. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, that's a fact. Like, if you go back to the 60s, right? Like, up until then, Eastern Europeans, Italians, they were always that other, right? Maybe white on paper on the census, but then again, like Arabs and even Sikhs tried to become white on the census. It doesn't mean anything. It's a piece of paper. I think the Sikh lost, the Arabs won, the Jews were always white. I mean, I think Somalians were white at some point.
Yeah.
But no, and then when integration started happening, you had, say, George Lincoln Rockwell. He went into, like, he had no success. I mean, he was a clown. But he went into Chicago where there was huge Eastern European immigrant communities, and he started trying to rally them. It's like suddenly now these people are becoming white, right? Because the Anglo reactionary needed more foot soldiers because there just weren't enough Anglos left, right? They were weak. They're cucks. They're just, I mean, they're dying people, and so they need. Now you're seeing with Hispanics, they're trying to recruit the Hispanics. They're trying to recruit the. I mean, they're even recruiting, like, say, people that are a quarter black or half black at this point.
Right. Well, like Andy, it's like the vampire needs fresh blood.
Listen, I just like what you said, Rancho. Like the patent, the copyright of white, and who holds the keys. It's like whiteness is mediated through Anglo specifically, but maybe a little bit more broader northwestern European, maybe France, Germany, maybe Scandinavia a little bit.
Northwest.
But it's like, as a Southern European, as a Mediterranean, your whiteness is always suspect. In other words, and all the pygmies in the audience, everybody think about this, and it's true. You're always having to prove how much like a German you are, or how much in common you have with Germany, or how much in common you have with France, or how much in common you have with England or Scandinavia or the Vikings or whatever. You're always having to do that. You never see a German person or a Norwegian person having to explain to you how much like a Southern European they are. It's like, oh, I'm late all the time everywhere. I'm just like, we're just like brothers. I'm super relaxed. Like, they never do that. You're always the one that has to prove yourself to them. They never have to prove themselves to you. They never have to adopt any of the let's say archetypical things of Southern Europeans or of Slavs. Maybe it's always us that we have to go like, did you know that Charles V was German? Did you know that Spain has a lot in common with Germany? Did you know that the Vikings arrived in Italy? It's always us that have to prove that we are. Why? Because whiteness comes from the north to south. When you think of a white person, what do you think? You don't think black hair and brown eyes, because a lot of non-white people have black hair and brown eyes. You think about blonde hair, even though it's true that there's blonde people in other places, but I'm talking about the stereotype. It's the blonde person with pale skin with blue eyes. That's what a stereotypical, like, that's as white as you can get, right? You don't get whiter by going south. You get whiter by going north. So whenever you want to stick yourself to this identity, look at a map, look at where it goes, from where it flows to where, like who defines the characteristics and the terms.
To perfectly illustrate what Dennis is saying, this is a tweet from Varg. If you guys don't know who Varg is, he's the guy that from the metal band Bursum, and he was pretty significant on YouTube before he got banned. He's a Nordicist. He's from Norway as well, And here's what he says, quote, "This Turkish Muslim is my brother in blood. We come from the same roots. I would sacrifice my life to defend his, but I would not even sacrifice a single thought to help any of the quote-unquote South European Christians in my last tweet. They are completely alien to me." And for those who are just listening, it's a Turkish guy who, yeah, I mean, he kind of looks, like a stereotypical Viking kind of guy. But, I guess the question would be, would that guy sacrifice his life for Varg? And the question is probably not, because he's Turkish, and Turks are very, very, ethnocentric. They're not racially centric. They're ethnocentric.
There's so many different. So basically, Gandalf don't claim you.
Gandalf don't claim you. Uncle Varg don't claim you.
Varg.
I mean, yeah, it's like, just, what is a white person? Like a blonde, like that guy is unequivocally white. Southern Europeans, Mediterranean people are suspect white. They're always having to. And look at how much, like, you always have to be renouncing part of your heritage. Always have to be denouncing part of your history. It's like, but weren't you guys, like, you're from Sicily? Wasn't your island occupied by Tunisia for thousands of years, for hundreds of years? No, man, like, no. Okay, yeah, the island did, but my family stayed pure, man. Like, I swear, like, no more came near my wife, near my mom. No more came near my grandmother. It's like, you're always like, Nords never have to do that. I've never seen a Northern European having to explain his ancestry, like explain blemishes in his ancestry. Is like, yeah, I'm actually not descended from that person. Like, I know. No.
Even
It's like
Finns don't have to do that, and they have like considerable like admixture from like Asian places too.
Even they don't have to do it. It's always us. It's always us that if we want to get into the club, we're always having to renounce the Moors, explain how it's just a myth. Like, no more ever touch a Spanish woman. Like, that never happened ever. No mixing there. No, never happened. Italians the same. They don't have to do it. Like, it's their copyright. It's their trademark. Why do you want to, like? Who are they kidding? Trying to pretend like we're just like one big group and we're all just one big people. And the other thing is that like, again, historically, it's not true that the Europeans saw themselves as one big group outside of maybe Catholicism, outside of maybe Christianity. That's the closest you get to like a European, pan-European identity. But it's like they want to pretend, like people like Jared Taylor want to pretend like there's no open grievances still. Like there's no political conflicts, there's no political interest, like where it's like Hispanics and the Hispanic civilization, including Spain, has no conflicts, no problems with England, or England still occupies, like Las
Malvinas.
No, Las Malvinas. No, in Europe. Oh my God, what are the name of the
Gibraltar?
Yeah, Gibraltar. And they want to pretend like, oh no, yeah, like just put it behind you. Just put it behind you. We're one big group now, because they're in trouble now. It's like they're not doing so well right now, and so it's like no, forget about all those problems, forget about all those differences, all those different claims, forget about any, like, this is why people like Jared Taylor want to reduce it to race, because it's like the minimum thing in common. Everything else is different. Like he can't people like Jared Taylor and white nationalists can't go just a tiny bit above race, because then it all falls down, because philosophically it's different, theologically the outlook is completely different, everything else is different. So it's like you got to look at like almost like the atomic structure of Europeans. It's like we share the same atoms, bro. So we're the same. And at that point, it's just like you might as well just say like, oh, all human beings, one race, the human race. When you look at it so fine grained.
Excellent point. To me, this whole concept of white race or black race is like pre-globalism, right? Like all these fringe guys on the right talk about like, oh, mestizaje and like what the Spanish Empire did was like globalism, bro. So you're saying globalism. Me saying embrace our mestizaje, right? Embrace our ethnogenesis of 500 years means, oh, so you're promoting race mixing and globalism. I'm sorry, I just forgot my point.
Let me
It
just
doesn't
add
matter. It was
to
based.
No. Hold on. I remember. My point is that this whole notion of white or black race is like the baby step before that. So it's like I'm going to take 32 flavors of Europe and I'm going to just turn it into vanilla. And then I'm going to take, 64 flavors of Africa and I'm going to turn it into chocolate. And then I'm going to take Latin America and call it brown. And, we got caramel. And then, the yellows and the South Indian. So there'll be like 5 core flavors of ice cream. And then what's the next step? Well, then let's just create one mush of ice cream. Like that which they're denouncing is what white identity and black identity are. It's a baby step. You're converting all these differences of these continents into a monolithic thing, which by coincidence, the people who define it happen to be the Anglos. Whether they be white or black, they get to define what white or black is.
Or Jewish.
They're all Jewish.
Which is white. Yeah. I mean, it's what you were saying about the data. It's like, okay, so like Jared Taylor is choosing to present the data about human differences like this, but then you could go like, okay, but don't we share like 100% of our DNA? So it's like one race, the human race. There you go. There it is.
Yeah.
There's no difference.
Don't we share a bunch of DNA with a banana? Like, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you zoom in so much, there's no like we're all atoms, dude. Like at the end, we're just electrons and protons, spinning around. But they can't go above that level. They can't. This is why they have the autistic fixation with genetic charts and irrelevant stuff, because they cannot rise above it. Because you take one step above genetics, and ethnicity just completely destroys all their ideas of race.
Yep.
Just a very quick point to all this big gnats still shilling for white people and white nationalists. Let me just put it to you this way. If Richard Spencer wouldn't allow you to marry his daughter, you're not white. Okay? I'm gonna just.
He has a daughter?
That. No, but
He actually does.
But she's like she's like a newborn. So like, I mean, when she grows up, obviously. Like, if he wouldn't let you marry her daughter, you're not white.
Who? Jared Taylor?
No, Richard Spencer.
I'm pretty sure Richard Spencer would allow it. Like at this point, it seems to me like Richard Spencer gave up, and he's like,
his wife, who he had kids with, was like a Central Asian Russia, which is kind of interesting.
But I think
she's
Eurasian.
He had a child with Nina Vicentina?
Yeah.
Yes.
He got 2, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay.
She looks like a Mexican, to be honest.
Yeah, she does. She doesn't look white.
She looks like a girl from Michoacan with a pointy nose. She just has that.
All right, so there's a pinned message that Tercio had at the 1 hour 40-minute mark. So Tercio, you said Jared Taylor makes the argument that it's the Jews that want to deny the reality of race and therefore are allies of EMJ, and then you keep going on. So do you want us to? Let me just roll the clip, right, and then we can discuss with you. All right, so 140.
Germany, but that's okay. So we're both white. When I went in Germany, but that's okay. So we're both white guys. Okay. Let me ask you another question. Can a Jew become a Chinaman? Well, that's exactly what happened during the Cultural Revolution in China, because Stanley Rittenberg, an American Jew from South Carolina, not only became a Chinaman, and how did he, by learning Chinese, he was a leader of the Cultural Revolution. So if you're going to ask me how race figured into that, it didn't figure into that at all. The crucial issue is language.
May I make a comment here?
Yes.
The idea of an African becoming a Pole if he learns Polish and becomes Catholic seems quite preposterous to me. We've had blacks in the United States since 1619, as the New York Times never fails to remind us. They speak English. They are.
Hold on. This is the Afro-Saxon question. I might have pinned it wrong, but here you go. Here we have Jared Taylor denying that Black Americans are indeed Anglos, which they are.
Yeah.
So Michael Jones, if you're watching this video, just call them Afro-Saxons from now on. You're gonna get under this under the racist skin, because it's gonna hurt them. They're Afro-Saxons. Just use that word.
Yeah.
As the New York Times.
I thought of Alexander Pushkin, and he was Russian, and I think his grandfather was black, right? He was like Peter.
Yeah. Again, yeah.
Actually.
Oh, hold on. Oh, okay, wait. Go ahead, Marcus. I thought the video was wrong.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, his grandfather was an African who he basically got adopted
I think he was descended from some kind of tribal nobility, and yeah, he was assimilated into Russian culture and married a Russian woman and just mixed in.
Right. He was Peter the Great's like valet boy. He was basically his slave, but he got to be like the king's slave, which like was dope. And then he got his freedom and he got like educated. And I think his son was like a general in the Russian military. And then the grandson is Alexander Pushkin. So there's a Russified black man that we can point out. And then wasn't Alexandre Dumas?
Yes.
French, yeah. French African.
So here's the thing again, like the people like Jared Taylor, they just think in like slides, or they don't see history as a process. So when they talk about like a black person that moves to Poland and learns Polish, he's thinking of like right now, like this second.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Of course. If I just get off the plane in Poland, I'm not Polish. But if I have a kid in Poland and that kid has a kid in Poland, then they are Polish. This is the process where they don't understand.
Yeah, this is what I've said to people when people ask me these type of questions. I say, look, man, if you're going to join another ethnicity, you need to basically participate in the ethnicity. You need to adopt their language, their customs, their culture, their worldview, essentially. And it's not just you adopting it, right? That's not enough. They also have to treat you as one of them. They have to adopt you. The ethnos has to adopt you, right? And the ethnos, depending on the type of ethnos, will adopt you if you have adopted them. And you'll be integrated, and probably in a generation or two, you can hardly see your foreignness within the ethnos. And so certain ethnos allow for this transformation much easier than other ones. And so basically what you were saying, Tercio, what you're pointing out is that he don't claim Afro-Saxons. So to all my African-American, all my A.S.S, all my FBAs, all my Afro-Saxons, look, your white daddy don't claim you. He don't claim you. But we've always claimed the mulattoes and quadroons of Dominican Republic and Colombia and Venezuela and all the places where you might find them. I mean, quite literally, the dude who dipped into his black slave girl who worked in the kitchen, right? The Spaniard who dipped into the chocolate pudding would recognize his son, right? his half black son, he would recognize him, give him his last name, and he would be in the inheritance. Whereas Thomas Jefferson kept his half black children in slavery. See the difference?
Here's the interesting thing. I think you guys are going to find this interesting. So the Hispanic world will claim, will accept, right? You guys accepted immigrants. You guys tried to assimilate them, right? Compared to the Anglo world, where they just push them aside until they're conveniently used, right?
Right.
So a little history is, I don't know how much you guys know about, like, say, do you guys know who Matt Hale is? Have you guys ever heard of him? The white nationalist, the lawyer who went to prison for
Oh yeah, the creation guy.
Yeah, right. So he took over basically it's like a worshiping your race type religion, right? He took it over from a guy named Ben Klassen, who was he was a Mennonite from Ukraine, or it was still the Russian Empire back then. This is about 100 years ago. Where his family was from got wrecked in the Russian Civil War, right? Between the Red Army and the White Army. And they fled, right? America didn't take them. Europe didn't want them. Mexico took his family in and saved them from dying, right? Wow. They lived in Mexico when he was a kid, and only they were wetbacks. They came over the border into the United States. So just you guys took anybody. You guys. If it wasn't for the Hispanic world, these Wignats wouldn't have one of their I don't know if you want to call him a prophet or philosopher or just crazy guy.
What an ungrateful little shit he was then.
Yeah, totally. There was another case. There was another case recently of some black girl who like singing rancheras, and when the story broke out, everybody was like, "Oh, that's crazy!" Like this, like African American girl was adopted by this couple in Zacatecas, like lived on the rancho, and like this black girl's mom was like a crackhead. So this Mexican couple like adopted this black child and like raised them as a Mexican girl. And, she like sings ranchera music. And of course, because she's black, she's got good vocal cords on her. And so, she's a very impressive singer, but like, there was people kind of hating on her. There's always hating people. And she like got mad and she's like, your grandma's a fucking racist. And like, she's allowing herself to be used as a proxy. But it kind of pissed me off because I'm like, look, girl, like you got adopted. Not everyone's grandma has to accept you. Like that's not enough for you to try to lend yourself to be a proxy. Like appreciate that most people do. And when you speak to them in Spanish and you tell them about your life in the rancho, they probably immediately open the door to you and have you sit down. Like, stop that. But it made me pause and think, could you ever imagine an African-American couple adopting a little Mexican orphan? Like I can never in a million years imagine that ever happening. And, they portray Mexico as this racist country. And I think even Hispanics have this impression of Mexico being that way. But Mexico allowed the Black Seminoles in when Andrew Jackson was trying to exterminate them in Florida. Go to Coahuila, and there's descendants of the Black Seminoles there. And they hardly look black anymore. They look like Henry and me, and Klaus and Billy. My point is, it's like, yes, you're right. The Arabs who went into Mexico and Colombia, after 2 generations, people like Salma Hayek, people like Shakira, Carlos Slim, right? Like Bukele, the president of El Salvador. Like I look at people like the Chinese that are very like, I think Chinese are the hardest people to assimilate. And the only place where you see the Chinese assimilating is in Latin America. That's the only place you see them be absorbed.
I mean, I would argue that the United States also assimilated them after a while. You see a lot of
they
like,
usually marry
Chinese
Americans. That's the thing.
Well, that's the thing. So, just to clarify for everyone listening, that there has to be some sort of mixing into the tribe. You can't just maintain your sort of quote unquote ethnic or racial purity, because I think that we would find it kind of suspect. Say, for example, if you had a Chinese family going 4 generations in Hispanoamerica and they still look very Han Chinese. It's like, what, you didn't meet any girl you liked that was from here? Really? Like, what's going on? It kind of makes me think that you don't really want to assimilate, that you're there for something else, economic sort of exploitation type of thing. I don't know what you guys think about that. Yeah,
well, and that's okay. Like, that's fine if you're gonna come make money here and you're offering a value in exchange for that money. Like, people are going to offer you license. But what I'm saying is, you go to Brazil and you'll see like girls with Japanese faces, like black girl bodies and like Indian hair. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and in Nicaragua, there's a Chinese population and like they mostly look like Nicaraguans with slightly chinkier eyes. You get what I mean? It's like in Peru, you find this as well. I think, like, yes, you do see Asians marry whites here, and it's more like kind of an academic elite that seems to kind of do that. But by and large, the communities stay intact. Like, go to Chinatown in Havana, and you'll still find like Chinese descendant people, but like they've all just kind of been blended into the Cubans, right? Does that make sense? It's like it's not intact and separate from Cuba. It's been absorbed.
Even Batista was part Chinese.
Really?
Is that true?
Yeah,
kind of looks like it when you think about it.
I don't know what's real anymore.
Also, the first person Che Guevara executed was a Chinese Cuban, last name Chang.
Damn, they be hating these Chigas, bro. They be hating these Chigas. Nah, I think wasn't Batista like the first quote unquote president of color in Cuba? Like, I think he was the first and I think the only one ever.
I mean, there weren't a lot of rulers of Cuba while it was independent, but yeah, he was.
Exactly. So, like, he was the only one, and then it's been, well, quote unquote white, Fidel and Raul. We wouldn't call him white, but you guys know what I mean. All right, so do we continue? Let's go.
Yeah.
Times never fails to remind us. They speak English. They are more professing Christians than they are whites in the United States. And yet the division between their behavior, their loyalty, their actions, all of these things seem to increase the more actual formal equality they have. So the idea of an Ugandan becoming a Pole seems to me to be vastly unlikely.
Yeah. I did. Some Polish guy wrote to me and he said when he went to school, there was a black girl there. And the black girl is there at school and she's having lunch. And the Polish kid came over to her and he said, I didn't know Negroes ate sandwiches. And the black girl says, well, now you know. So it did happen. It did happen in Poland. And the second point here is, secondly, the United States is, I've made this claim before, maybe people forgot it, but race has been weaponized as a category of the mind throughout the United States history. Of course it has. Who's denying that? Am I denying that there was racial conflict in the United States? Of course not. I am saying that it was weaponized by a certain group of people that no one's allowed to talk about.
And you are convinced that if 5 million Ugandans moved to
Now, wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. You're changing the terms.
No,
of the
no, I'm
argument.
not.
Now,
I'm
wait
not.
a minute. I am going to say there. I know what weaponized migration is because I lived through it in my lifetime. In North, I grew up in an Irish neighborhood. There were no such thing as white neighborhoods in Philadelphia. They were ethnic neighborhoods. I grew up in an Irish neighborhood, and in 1954, the blacks crossed Lehigh Avenue, and everyone left. I've talked about this in my book, Slaughter of Cities. I called it what it was. It was ethnic cleansing. It was the use of black people as proxy warriors to destroy Catholic neighborhoods. So don't say that I haven't talked about it.
Well, Dr. Jones, let's look at Mr.
Hold
Taylor.
on. Pause it real quick. He's 100% right. They did it in Boston. They did it in New York. They did it in Philly, Chicago, Detroit. I mean, my dad, where he grew up, they used them as battering rams to destroy the ethnic communities. I mean, that's a fact.
When I lived in the United States in Illinois, one of my martial arts instructor was of Croatian descent, and he basically told me the same thing, that when he lived in Chicago, in the Croatian neighborhood, basically, and his entire family was Catholic. He was still Catholic, maybe a liberal Catholic, but still Catholic. And he told me the same story. Motu proprio. He wasn't like a E. Michael Jones fan or anything. He just told me his life story. Like, the real estate people started moving in blacks so that to basically destroy the neighborhoods. He wouldn't put it in those terms, but he did say like they started moving black people in, and he basically said whites started to freak out and started to move to the suburbs, and then the real estate companies just bought in all the real estate. And even I can. I'm not American, and even I can anecdotally confirm those type of stories because they were told to me.
Can I just say this as well? E. Michael Jones has an entire book where he talks about this, and it's briefly mentioned, called Slaughter of Cities. And yeah, he talks about how a lot of, all of these cities were composed primarily of ethnically European neighborhoods where, their ethnicity in combination with religion was what kept these neighborhoods intact. And he basically also, in the debate, names one of the Ford Foundation sort of philanthropists, if you will, who was, I believe, of Anglo-Saxon and Protestant Irish.
Do you have those timestamps, Billy?
I can pull them up. I don't have it right on me, but basically,
you sent them to me.
I did, but I
do have some of them, but Noel, you told me that they're not exactly the same. I think it might be the same. I got the timestamps here. I got 20. I got 38 minutes.
But I think those are according to the video that Billy uploaded, which is cut differently from this one.
Yes, that is actually true.
I can change it. I can pull his video up and then
just do that. Okay,
so give me a minute. You guys can talk.
No, but yeah, basically he talks about in detail how the Anglo-Saxon elites worked hand in hand with the Jewish American elites who, they didn't see themselves really as different from the Jews at the end of the day. Many of them LARP as Jews. And they worked to weaponize the civil rights movement to put, just a bunch of black Americans into these homogenous ethnically, for example, like Polish or Lithuanian neighborhoods and Irish neighborhoods, in order to incentivize these people to leave and utilize the GI Bill in order to flee to the suburbs, where they would just become generic, deracinated white people who no longer belong to these ethnic parishes anymore. That's why if you go to the hoods of most of these cities, you can see really beautiful churches that were, built primarily by European immigrants. But the reason why it's in the hood is because they all ran away, because this was an ethnic cleansing situation. It's not the black people's fault. I want to make that very clear. They were utilized by the Anglo-Saxon elites in order to destroy ethnicity in, these places, if that makes sense.
And it was, it goes. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Marcus.
I was going to say, no, and it ties back to what I said earlier. That's when you start to see these wignats like Rockwell start to target these immigrant communities. That was the first time that a lot of these groups saw themselves as white. Before that, it was, they were Irish or they were Polish. or they were Italian or whatever. They didn't identify as white. White boy was the, the rich country club people that lived, down on in the suburbs, or, down on Long Island, or, on the
Well,
North
why was
Shore here in
Marcus, real quickly,
Massachusetts.
wasn't white more of like an identifier if like you lived in the South, since mostly people were just Anglo-Saxon there?
Yeah,
With some
it was
Germans,
white.
obviously. But because you had
Yeah,
so
it
many
was white.
blacks too.
It was white, yeah, and they would differentiate themselves from the immigrants. There were some immigrants, and there were. I mean, they would lynch, Italians, Polish, Czechs, Hungarians, whatever, for
But
anything like
Sephardic Jews
which
from
were.
Morocco were white, though. Nobody
Yes,
questioned that in the South.
they were the white. They were part of the white elite. I mean,
Yes.
Judah Benjamin. I mean, you can still go to see some of these the old slave auction buildings, and closed on Christmas, closed on Jewish high holidays.
Like, if you were an Italian American, you need to come to terms with the fact that, like, Middle Eastern Jews were considered to be, like, people that were more American, more whiter, and just generally people to look up to in comparison to you, I would say.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we can confirm that with the fact that there were citizens back when naturalization laws kind of required that you were a quote free white man of good character. I think that was the Naturalization Act of 1790.
1790, yep.
1790, exactly. So that's why this whole white definition is it's too generalized. Because if you're telling me that North African Jews are white, then I mean that kind of means nothing.
At the same time, you had the Anglo elite and the brand new United States talking about making Hebrew the official language of the government. So
yeah, this was a documented, recorded instance that they debated on and almost passed.
All right, so we got 107:45. Noel, are you there? I'm gonna play one of the timestamps you requested.
Yeah, play that. I'm not exactly sure where it starts, but I think it's around here. Go ahead, play it.
Tapped down by a self-described chubby kite named Roberta Kaplan.
Go back.
Is Roberta Kaplan white, Jared?
Pause it. Go back like 30 seconds. Or, 30 seconds is fine. So basically, to fill you guys in, at a certain point, we haven't even shown you E. Michael Jones' responses to Jared Taylor. We kind of just started with Jared Taylor's. But at some point in the debate, E. Michael Jones calls out Jared Taylor for basically being Judaized. Jared Taylor considers Jewish people white, men of the West, as he calls them, which a lot of white nationalists have a problem with. And we always remind them, like, Scarlett Johansson's white, bro.
She's whiter than you.
Yeah, a lot of these dudes. So E. Michael Jones calls out that, Jared Taylor's not on the SP. I think the SPLC kind of praised him, like, for being like on their side.
Well, they were kind of like, this is a more progressive, like, I guess, racist organization, because like they were being inclusive of, like, Jewish people for once. Yeah. Which was not normal among like skinheads usually, in those types. Right. Like usually they would be very big on not doing that.
Right. So, E. Michael Jones calls him out on that. And, basically what E. Michael Jones is displaying here is that, well, if you identify as white, if you become a deracinated generic white American with no ethnicity, then you're basically playing into the plans of other people. Chiefly the J's and the A's. He basically puts forth in his argument, which is kind of a theory that I think a lot of us have coincided with, independently of listening to E. Michael Jones or not. So that's what this point is, and I just want to share a little bit about that. Actually, I want to read real quick some of the comments. Otto made a very good point. Here it is. He said, Hispanics get nothing from joining with other groups of people. All you're going to do is join the bottom half of their group. And he's talking to, Hispanics on the chocolate side, Hispanics on the white side, who, let go of their Hispanicity and basically become a gringo, whether it's a white or black gringo. And I thought that was a very good point. Santiago said, I think American Catholics will eventually be absorbed into Hispanic ethnos. I know many Irish German Catholics who married Mexican women and have Mexican children. I think this is a very fascinating subject that just doesn't, it's never gotten any serious academic respect. There's no research on it as far as I can tell. But I think the process of Hispanization in the United States is a very interesting phenomenon.
Hold on, Rancho, real quickly. Actually, Jones does cite something related to this, a study on this, where he's talking about the triple melting pot theory.
Yeah,
basically, he says after 3 generations, people have been so Americanized that usually if there's any sort of main identity they hold on to, it's religiously, usually Protestant, Catholic, or Jewish.
Right. And so he's referencing this theory, the triple melting, and he calls it a theory, and he says maybe it needs to be updated. And I would agree, Dr. Jones, if you're listening to this at some point, that it does need to be updated. And I think what Santiago's asking us about might be a different way to kind of update this thing. To answer Santiago, yes, Hispanization is happening. You see it in places like California. You'll have Persian kids who speak perfect Spanish and like grew up with Mexican neighbors and like just function. And you can see this in the Mexican mafia. I mean, Pegleg Morgan was Croatian, right? This is one of the earlier members of the Mexican mafia. So you've always seen this phenomenon, and you're going to continue to see this phenomenon. But I wouldn't just say it's going to happen blanketly, because there's a lot of kind of repressed white nationalists who've taken up Catholicism as a means to an end of kind of preserving my white race. You know, you do see this a lot. You see this a lot in Orthodoxy as well, where they're basically joining the church as like a last stand of whitedom. And
I was going to say, this is something actually I think we, should give a little bit of fair criticism against Jones on, is the fact that there is a point in this debate. I don't know if we have the clip, but that's really relevant at this point. But he basically makes the argument kind of like a plea to white nationalists, if you will. And he's done this on other podcasts too, where they invite him on, where he kind of says like, look, you tried to go out and do your thing in Charlottesville and you were denied. It doesn't work. Like, if you want to be like someone who gets their rights respected and you're white, you have to be Catholic. I don't think that was a good sales pitch. I think that
outdated.
Well, and it's kind of incentivizing people to join these churches for all the wrong reasons, is my point.
Yes.
You should not invite a bunch of white boys who only give a shit about race for the most part into the church so that they can be like, I'm not racist, I'm Catholic. But then you look in their group chat and they're just like any other Wignat.
Yeah. Churches are having problems with this left and right. I know a lot of Russian priests and bishops.
Also, I want to say, I want to say that joining, like being Catholic or Orthodox because your ancestors were Catholic, so that's like, I got to follow my European ancestors, so I'm going to be Catholic. That's a pagan reason. That's pagan reasoning. Like, you shouldn't join Catholicism or Orthodoxy because your ancestors were Catholic. Like that's not a good reason. Like we want you in the church because you believe in Christ, not because like your grandmother was Catholic.
Yes, that's a good point.
I blame Fuentes for all this this whole white Catholic thing. Anyway, sorry, Cicero, you were saying.
I want to
read. Say, and these Wignats will cry when like Eastern Orthodox is a big one. I don't know why. So you'll get like these Wignats from Appalachia joining, say, Russian Orthodox churches, and then they
even
cry.
Armenian ones too, like Matt Parrott.
yeah. They tried the Armenian one. They tried the Greek one, and then they cry when these parishes will tell them like, look, get the hell out of here. Like, we don't really want you here. You're fake. You're phony. You're coming in here and you're causing problems. You're not sincere about your conversion. It's just a stunt. Just like you see these kids trying to become Catholic. It's weird.
Well, they think Catholic's like a personality that you do on Twitter.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's not.
I blame Nick Fuentes for that.
Oh, he definitely deserves a lot of blame for that. I agree 100%.
Yeah. I wanted to,
let's keep going.
Let me read this comment real quick from BG. He said, so when Jews say they're not white, what the fuck does that mean? Well, that shows you how white is like a tool, right? It's like the Jews have the convenience of being able to be white when it's convenient to them and then quickly tap out and say, no, I'm Jewish.
Well, can I just add something to this real quickly? Like, the overwhelming majority of American Jews ostensibly see themselves as white American. It's throughout American history, it's been very common for them to mix with other European groups. This even actually happened a lot in Argentina as well. But my point is that like they've always been white since the beginning, a very high caste of white people, I should add. They've always been mixing with other people. A lot of white Americans are part Jewish because of this. And yeah, just because, you know, you
Like,
can cherry pick some Jews on Twitter saying I'm not white, I'm Jewish, doesn't mean that like most of these Jews don't see themselves as like white Jews, for example. They're just kind of accentuating the fact that, you know, whenever they say that, the main point is like I am like I have a real ethnicity that goes beyond whiteness, and I'm going to obviously identify with that over anything else, is what I would say.
Billy, I don't know about that. I feel like when Jews talk about being white in America, they have a very specific person in mind. So it would be an Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? That's what and specifically a Christian, right? A Christian European, which is what Jews aren't. So when they say I'm not white, what they're trying to say is like I'm not a John Smith, I'm a Chaim Goldberg type of thing. That's where I've kind
I
of
don't think
engaged.
you really disagreed with me there.
But the Jews
Oh,
use
okay.
it when it's convenient to them, dude.
But-
One of the things you have to understand about Jews is that there's a lot of different types of Jews. Like I was just at a cafe in the Valley, and it was like an Israeli cafe, and there was all Mizrahi Jews in there. There was no white Jews, and I thought to myself, like, even these people can't vibe with white Jews.
I mean, and then you got to go into places like the South where the Jews were the biggest upholders of white supremacy. Everybody knows about Selma, right? The March in Selma.
Yeah.
You had at the time like all the department stores in Selma. It was actually a nice little town. They were all owned by Jews. They owned them in Birmingham, Montgomery, and all the big cities. George Wallace was the governor, and he was like, you know what, just let these people go. It's not worth it. Let them march. Just, you know, don't let them. No, let's not have anybody get killed here. And it was the Jewish department store owners that were saying that he needs to order the state police to open fire into the crowd. They wanted people to be massacred because they were scared it was going to mess up their profits and it was going to mess up their, you know, they controlled the economy. They didn't want it to be affected.
Noah P. Benjamin.
But were there Jews on the other side of that coin as well? Or
Well,
representing in the
here's
north? Very progressive
local.
Jews.
Klaus, the thing is that in the American South, these Sephardic Jews very much, because they're, you know, half the state of these states are like, you know, because these states are like half black, they're just like, yeah, we're white. And it was obvious, and it was like, you know, in the North, you had a much different ethnic situation going on where these weren't Sephardic Jews, and these were primarily the descendants of Eastern European Jews that were coming in since the 1870s after the Civil War. A lot were fleeing during Russia specifically.
But also,
and they-
if all you have, like, if all these people care about is genetic distributions, there's no way you can say Jews are not white or not European. Right. So it's like, again, like the
Ashkenazi Jews, but Mizrahi and, you know, Sephardic. Well, actually, no, Sephardic even that. Yeah, Sephardic, they would also be considered white. Yes.
Most Jews are Ashkenazi Jews, if I understand.
At least in the United States.
U.S. absolutely.
Yeah,
we can get to a topic with that.
But it doesn't matter, because when they say Jew and we say Jew, we're talking about Ashkenazis. We're not talking about Mizrahi or any weird like Ethiopian Jews. Like nobody's thinking that. So again, it's like they wanna play it both ways. It's like when it's convenient, it's all genetics, and when it's not convenient, then it's like, oh no, the Jews are not white because their ethnicity is different, because they behave different. It's like it doesn't matter. You told me like what matters was the gene chart.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you're going to use genetics, I mean, you have to. They are white. I mean, they're very white. I mean, there's a reason why, if you look at Nazi Germany and they had their, you know, their racial laws, they had to differentiate, you know, 3 different categories of Jew. It's because most of the German Jews had intermarried already, you know, and most of them were, you know, maybe a quarter here, half here. I mean, they were more German than Jewish half the time.
Well, they had to be given golden stars because you couldn't tell half the time. Like,
yep.
Could you? I'm not. I feel like you can tell, like a real Jew. You can tell, like they have a very swarthy complexion.
You in Germany, dude, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised,
dude. Ashkenazis are fucking pale, dog. I don't know if you've ever been to Brooklyn, but
no, okay, but there is a nose to it.
They don't wash their hair. Yeah, the Anglos have that same nose, bruh.
Anglos get that
Italians
nose.
too. Some Italians have it too. Some French even.
Yeah.
No, but the Aquiline nose is different from the whatever. We'll get into this discussion.
Some of them
later.
got the hook nose. Some Poles got it.
Let's just keep rolling.
Dude, end of the day, Ashkenazi Jews, are Khazars, they're Slavic, they're Turkic, they're Germanic. They're a mix of this. There's going to be a difference in phenotypes amongst them. The Rhinelander Jews, the Pale of the settlement Jews, they're going to look a little bit different, but there's a reason why you had to put a star on them. If it was so obvious, why the fuck would you need to put a star on them?
Well, and like, why is Israel like have one of the highest rates of skin cancer in the world?
Yeah, dude.
Also, white nationalists complain about it all the time. That's why the triple parentheses meme was invented, precisely so they could tell Jews apart, because you can't. On simple, like just having a simple read, you read a last name or you look at a picture, you don't know.
Could they have differentiated Enoch's wife from an average white person?
I mean, she looked whiter than him.
That is a fact.
Yeah. And he's Serbian or something like that.
She was blonde and had colored eyes, and Mike is apparently 3/4
Serbian.
Norwegian. No, and a quarter Serbian.
A quarter Serbian, yeah.
Yeah, no, dude. I mean, again, I grew up in Redondo Beach in high school, and there was Jews who looked, Germanic, totally Germanic. I mean, I remember them; they were friends of mine. Like they were kids from high school, and there was nothing to tell you that they were Jewish. And in fact, I mean, now they're like, I didn't even know what really Jews were back then, I guess. But now if you look at certain people, you might think they're Jewish and they're like Italian or something, or Turkish.
I think this is quite simple, really. It's like, there was this kid that, I don't remember the show, but it was something like, if you think you might be gay, then you're gay, because if you're not gay, you don't go around thinking that you might be gay. So it's like, if you think Jews might be white, then they're white, because you don't go thinking like, are blacks white? Are Japanese people white?
Right.
Are Hondurans white? So the fact that we're having this like little debate or whatever, it's like they're white. It's like, if you think you might be gay, then you're gay. If you think the Jews might be white, then they're white. There's nothing else to it.
And the final hope that they have is like, well, the DNA tests, everybody.
But they did the DNA test of Ashkenazis, and they're pretty hard to distinguish from most Eastern Europeans. Shlomo Sands is an academic from Israel. He's actually from Israel. He's a Jew from Israel at Tel Aviv University, and he did studies on the Ashkenazis and he did studies on the Palestinians. And the Palestinians are the actual ones connected to the Hebrews, right? The Hebrews who became Christian and some of them later became Muslim are the Palestinians. Like, these are the actual Jews of Abraham and Moses. And these Ashkenazis are overwhelmingly Khazars.
What's funny is like most of these studies that Wignats will cite that I guess highlight the most, like, I guess, Middle Eastern ancestry that Ashkenazis have. These are usually copes that are done in order to justify, the invasion of Palestine, which they've been up to for a while. It's basically like we are the real people that live here. Totally.
Dude, I was thinking that today when I was at this cafe, and there was all these Mizrahi Jews, and I didn't realize that this was an Israeli spot, right? I'm here with my Mexican homie having lunch, and then it's like, I'm in the valley, so it's like, people are Persian, Russian, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, oh no, everybody here is like a Persian Jew or something like that. And I thought to myself, when these people made Aliyah and went back to the promised land from the hills of Georgia or whatever the hell they came from Bukhara, and they saw these Polish white Jews, were they like, who the fuck are these white kids? Like, they had to have thought to themselves, like, you're not Jewish. Where the fuck did you come from? Like, this is not what we look like. We look like we do, right? Like, I'm thinking if you're Sephardic or if you're Mizrahi, you look more Near Eastern. But then all of a sudden, these Germanic Jews come in, or these, Slavic Jews come in, and then you think to yourself, well, where the fuck did these guys come from?
Noel, there's another thing too, which is funny about like internal dynamics of Israel, where I don't have the video in front of me, but I remember this made the news a few months ago, where essentially these very like, I guess, nationalist or right-wing sort of like Middle Eastern Jews that were living in Israel that were, I believe, Hasidic too, or something similar to that, like super, super religious. They did like an advertisement where like one of those super religious Jews is marrying like a Russian Jew. And then basically, I think like the rabbi at some point like stopped speaking Hebrew, and then everyone's just like speaking Russian, and then it's kind of like talking about how like, don't marry her, like you're going to like ruin your genes by doing. Basically, that's kind of like the message it was saying, that like they're kind of like shit, like don't mix with these Russians, like. And not only that, but Israel has had a problem in the past where a lot of like poor Russian people during the 90s, when Boris Yeltsin basically just turned Russia into a free market zone, and then people started starving like crazy. A lot of them just started immigrating to Israel and would just say they're Jewish, and it became like a problem. And that's the DNA. So Wignats will cite this situation and say that, oh, Israel will DNA test people to determine whether they're Jewish or not. It's only in this specific situation if you're supposedly a Russian Jew, because so many were just lying about being Jewish.
Yeah, that's
That is true.
My wife knew one that did that. She was going to college here in the United States, and they were talking, and my wife was like, "Are you Jewish?" And she was like, "No." She goes, "I'm just Russian." She goes, "But don't tell anybody."
Oh, I know a lot of Russians like that. I know a lot of Russians like that.
It got so bad that there were even neo-Nazi groups in Israel, and they were all Russians. Because they were like, this Jewish, I don't acknowledge. I'm Russian.
You guys have all seen Lord of War, right? With
yes, Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage, and his dad LARPs like a Jew, even though he's not, because it was politically expedient in that situation.
All right, anyway,
I was gonna say Nicolas Cage's uncle actually directed like all those mob movies that you hear about, like
Coppola.
Yeah. That's an interesting tidbit. Sorry.
Okay. All right, let's go.
Unwitting accomplices in the destruction of their own culture and their own lives, as happened at Charlottesville. Anyone who claims that Jews are white is the enemy of the white people he claims to lead. Like the Mahdi who inspired thousands of his followers to charge Kitchener's Maxim guns, waving scimitars astride their camels at the Battle of Omdurman. Racial apologists like Jared Taylor inspired Richard Spencer to hand out spears to the white boys and point them in the direction of the legal machine gun nest in Charlottesville, where they all got mowed down by a self-described chubby lesbian kike named Roberta Kaplan. Is Roberta Kaplan white, Jared? Is Jennifer Rubin white, Jared? If so, why did she just tweet?
No, don't use those kinds of slurs on the stream, because you'll harm my channel.
Pussy ass white boy.
Well, there are no slurs here. I'm asking a question. If Jews are white, why does Jennifer Rubin feel the need to prevent minority white rule? I think I know the answer to that question. If Jews are white, then whites are Jews. Since Jews have power and whites do not, this means that the whites who follow Taylor's understanding of race end up internalizing the commands of their oppressors and being controlled by the very people they need to oppose. Jared knows this, but do you turn around when someone yells, "Hey, asshole"? Are you willing to ruin your life for a category mistake? Thank you.
Yeah, so that kind of just touched on what we were, I guess, already expanding on. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think there was you gave me a timestamp of hate asshole, which was it's a thought experiment, but I'm not sure if it was on this video or on the other video. Let me see. No, it is on Billy's video. So let me go back to 38 minutes into it.
Well, I want to say one thing to the audience here, that there is a Russian writer that I enjoy. His name is Lev Gumilev, and he was like an ethno-sociologist. So these were people, who kind of came after the mid 1800s, kind of, these social sciences kind of sprung out. And so these people were studying like, what is ethnicity? Max Weber, Sherry Kagovich is another guy. And Lev Gumilev is kind of that tradition or of that discipline of study. And he talks about how ethnicity, there's a piece that the people of the ethnicity kind of define what the ethnicity is. And he calls these people passionaries. And these people are like emblematic of the ethnos. These are people who kind of embody the spirit of the ethnos, and they're kind of crazy. He kind of talks about the Old Testament prophets being passionaries, right? Where they kind of saw the decadence of their people and they kind of rallied them back to like first principles. And so the Passionary, in a sense, marks the edges of what is the ethnos. And Lev is basically saying that that's up to the generation of people, especially men, to define it. Like it's like there's a certain fluidity to it. It's up to you to define it. And so inspired by that is where I kind of, or it dawned on me of like the three roots that I talk about, right? With these kind of three concepts that kind of tie a Hispanic into Hispanidad. The first one being Cristo Rey, a recognition of Logos incarnate, which, you can do a whole episode, you can do a whole book just on that first principle. The second principle is our paternal root, the Spanish language and heritage and legacy. And the third one is el mestizaje, which is like our maternal root. And the mestizaje took again, the second root is a universal that we all have in common. And the third root is unique, hyper unique to us. So different regions of Mexico have their own unique mestizaje. Different regions of South America have their own unique mestizaje. And you can even claim that Spain, the Iberian Peninsula itself, is a product of mestizaje of another form of different. So it kind of, gives us a different mom with all having the same dad. And one of the key concepts, the first one was Cristo Rey. So what we're basically saying here is a recognition. It doesn't mean that you have to be like, a practicing Catholic. Ideally you do go to church, but if you reject that first root, like say you are a Jewish person who doesn't believe that Christ is the Logos incarnate, doesn't believe he's a son of God, he doesn't have these metaphysical, I'm talking philosophical terms here at the very least. If you don't agree with this kind of metaphysical, cosmological worldview principle, then we're kind of saying you can't be Hispanic, right? It's like you have to agree with a certain view of the world. And I think that's very important because when you say something like white, it's so generic, it's so ambiguous. It could be, white to one person is white to a different white person, right? Like it's so arbitrary. There's no cultural institution to tie this identity together unless you're talking about a Meremuts, which then you should call yourself a Meremuts. That would be an ethnicity as opposed to white, because then you can define those principles. And if you define a principle based on Christ, well, then that automatically leads to certain groups of people who can't claim it. They can be, you can be a Mexican who became Muslim, but in a sense, or became Jewish or Buddhist or whatever the heck, or Hindu. But in a sense, you've deprived yourself, disconnected yourself from the most important root, at least a third of which, but at least it's the first one. So you're kind of on your way out. Now, if the next generation you lose your language and now you're practicing the Baha'i faith, well, then how Hispanic are you? Like, yeah, you may have some Hispanic ancestry, but like, are you ethnically Hispanic anymore? No, you're not. You're something else.
Well, Noel, I want to say this as well. This is actually a significant problem in the white nationalist community these days, where like religious infighting. So basically, they try to prevent infighting, despite the fact that like white nationalism is filled with literal Satanists, pagans, atheists, and in Christians of every single denomination that you can think of, essentially, right?
Yes.
And this is like a huge problem because it's like, how are you going to do something? Like, how are you as like a Catholic white nationalist going to work with like Satanists, people that worship the devil, But that's like a problem. And if you bring this up in these things, people often just say, no infighting, guys, this isn't important. But like it is. And I was going to say another thing too. I don't have the clip, but Jones actually he had a pretty good take on Nazi Germany, where essentially he talks about how the Protestant Reformation essentially cut Germany in half by Protestants and Catholics. And race was something that Hitler was utilized and was motivated by Madison Grant to try and connect all of these people together as one thing, since he saw no other way to reconcile the Protestant Reformation, which I think is valid. Like, I guess that was the only way he saw that you could unite all the German people as one.
Right.
But you gotta give them something. Like even Uncle Adolf understood this. It wasn't all just racial stuff. It's like you gotta turn it. You need a religion. and this is why you see, for like, you need a religion and you need an ethnicity. This is why you see, even though everybody's like a white, like in the white nationalist movement, everybody's like white nationalists. They don't talk about like when they talk about history or ethnicity, they don't talk generic white. They talk about like my Roman Empire, my Vikings. They talk about very concrete things.
Yeah.
Right. So to answer to Billy's point, so that's kind of the trap that Christians who are white who find themselves in these groups get into, because you have to, at a certain point, if you want to have this whole racial unity thing, you're gonna have to worship your race above your faith. You're gonna have to put it in a higher order, because exactly the things that you say. Because how is a white Catholic going to sympathize with A, a white Muslim, B, a white Satanist, and C, a white atheist? You can't, unless all four of you worship skin above Christ.
Yes.
And so you're getting yourself into this very dark road where you're going to have to basically be side by side with someone who is a Satanist, right? Who is a literal, be it theistic or atheistic Satanist. We can get into that autism later. Or, as Tercio would put it, we reach whiteness, and then you realize, oh shit, we're actually much more different, and there are irreconcilable differences. And then you get what Europe has been experiencing for the longest time up until the end of the Second World War, which is Europeans just killing themselves over the smallest things, right? Well, not smallest, but Catholics killing Protestants, Protestants killing Catholics, Romans killing barbarians, and this thing and that thing. And so I'm just letting you white Christians know that you're not even making a deal with the devil, because there is no deal here. You don't get anything out of it other than I get to keep my demographics, which isn't even like, you can be a Polish.
That's flesh worshiping. I mean,
yes.
How many nations have existed throughout time? Like they don't exist anymore. Like nations transform into other ones, or they get wiped out. Like God is not, I forget the term, but he's not a preferer of men. Like God doesn't care about like how you see it. Like he's impartial to men. So maybe God, it might be God's will to say, you know what, I'm done with Hispanics. Like I'm going to destroy that whole thing. It's corrupt beyond redemption. That might be God's will. And, me as a person who's saying, you know what, I'm trying to rally the troops around this thing. I have to make peace with that. Like it's God's will to be done. And if that means, like Job, all my family has to die, or like Abraham was asked to take his son to be sacrificed, like, even though he stopped him, that's God's will. You have to subject yourself to God's will. You can't put the worship of your own flesh, of your own ancestry. Even that can become an idol. And we have to be careful about that, because everyone can fall into that trap.
There are many. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that there are many peoples, many ethnoi that God did curse and destroy. I think it was the Canaanites, if I'm not mistaken, that God just.
Sure, there's tons. The Jubazites, the Bubudites. I mean, there's some. The Bible's filled with them.
And here's an important nuance for Hispanics that want to defend Spain and the Spanish Empire, and is that Spain was valuable because it was Catholic.
Yes.
Like on its own, like it's not worth it to defend Spain on its own. Like the Spain of today, secular, progressive, gay Spain,
right?
It's worthless. Like Spain is worth defending because it was Catholic,
right? And that Hispanic Catholicism is Hispanidad. And that's not exclusive to Spain. Exactly. Spain doesn't own the copyright on that, right? Like that could be, you could find it in Guadalajara. You can find it in El Cibao. You can find it in tons of places. You can find it here in LA, in Southern California. So, again, that spirit, in a sense, still exists, and it's not tied to Spain anymore. Spain is not the center of Hispanidad. It's just not. It's it's jutting out of Europe.
And I want to say that so that be very careful if you're thinking about Catholicism. Don't do it because it's like, oh, I'm Spanish, or I'm of Hispanic descent, so therefore I got to be Catholic. It's like, no, like you don't have to be Catholic just because you're Spanish.
Yeah, because now you're making your ancestry into an idol.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So you need, if you end up becoming Catholic because you think it's the truth, then you will value the labor that Spain did in the New World specifically, well, and also in Europe in the Mediterranean. But like you got to get the order right. You can't become Catholic because you're Spanish.
Right. I wanted to answer this question that Godzilla Megatron asked. He said, if this channel is pro-Hispanic, why are you focused on white nationalists? Just asking. And I did answer. I said, it's because a lot of Hispanics have been infected with Anglo-racialist views on the white side and the black side.
Indigenistas too.
Right. Again, you have to look at the philosophical presuppositions of Anglo-racialist worldviews. It's biological determinist, it's empiricist, it's materialist. It doesn't account for the metaphysical. There's no account for the spirit. It's basically humans are a flesh machine that gets programmed, and there's no such thing as love or these kind of intangible things. These are just biochemical reactions, right? It's reducing everything to physical action. And as if humans are not autonomous, they have no autonomy in things. And so what you realize is that people who seemingly look to be on the opposite side, like let's say Chivo and Radical Latino, they actually philosophically have exactly the same worldview. They just cuck for different people. But they have the same philosophical presuppositions. They believe in biological determinism. They believe in reducing basically man to just flesh, materialism. They don't account for the metaphysical. They don't account for the spiritual. Matter is irredeemable. They believe in the exact same thing. They just believe it from a different end. So that's why we're kind of sharing this and dissecting it, so that hopefully people start better seeing how these philosophical, cosmological worldview presuppositions get tied into these views when you have these views. And then the ultimate goal is, ask yourself, is that the way Hispanics view existence? And if you ask yourself that, you'll realize no. If you know what Hispanics are, how they live, the essence of being Hispanic, if you lived in it or lived around it, you would know that. So that's why we're pointing this out.
I also have another. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition to that, Jared Taylor has appeared in Hispanic media. He appeared in this interview with the guy from Univision or
Jorge Ramos.
Jorge Ramos, yeah. And I actually found out quite recently that he even appeared in a local radio station in Colombia, in La W. He did an interview with them. So this already, in a way, is a kind of a Hispanic issue. But in addition to that, literally the day before this, or 2 days ago, we made a stream focused completely on Hispanic issues. So I don't know what you're really talking about.
Well, the other thing, Klaus, is that in the end, this is all liberalism. This is all Anglo-Saxon liberalism that we're fighting, and it's just the same. Like people like Jared Taylor and whatever white nationalist, modern racist, believe the same things for the last 200 years. And those 200 years are basically the thing that we're fighting. Maybe 500 years, because we're also fighting Protestantism. So it's all part of the same tree. It's all the same thing. And also it's our corner of the internet. You know, like there's a million maybe Hispanic history, whatever, that they more generic Hispanic. Our corner of the internet is these people and fighting against them because many of us came from there. And that's our niche. So it's like somebody's got to fill that niche. Somebody's got to give them an option that's not like, well, if you want out, then you got to become like I don't know, like a communist or something else. It's like you got to come back to Christ, basically.
And the thing is too, it's like so when people leave white nationalism, usually it's a scripted thing. They come out and they'll be like, well, why did you leave? Oh, I just don't like these people hating, or they're mean, or they do whatever. It's the way we've approached it. It's unique. It's never really been done before by people who've left these Wignet groups. We're going through it in a systematic way and just dismembering their beliefs, their outlooks, and what they do to these different groups. Like, I mean, the big one now is obviously they're targeting Hispanics. I mean, it's just like it's their most fertile recruitment ground now. It's because they're losing ground, they're losing people. Um, a lot of a lot of whites are just decadent, weak, fading away from history, and so now they need something new to some healthy blood, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, and Jared
And
Taylor had Nick Fuentes as a top speaker at his conference a few years
yeah,
ago.
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think nobody's ever really addressed Jared Taylor. It's you'll hear like mainstream outlets being like he's racist, he's mean, he says mean things about black people. That's it. There's nobody actually
Yeah.
goes in and just digs through these arguments like we have or any
Yeah.
of these groups.
Exactly.
It's
It's part of the reason why it's so seductive, because let's say the normie left or even the normie conservative, they really have no arguments against like the postulates of white nationalism, because they come from a more pure version of liberalism, a more coherent version of liberalism, if that makes sense. Like liberals today and leftists and people from the right, conservatives, they come from a more broken down version of liberals, like a beaten down version, a weakened version of liberalism. So the white nationalists are presenting something like that that's way like they don't even hear about. They're not prepared. Like the normies are not prepared to hear what the white nationalists or the racialists have to say. Like, for instance, Jared Taylor, I'm sure like that presentation with all those facts, he's just used to wowing everybody. Well, just like, oh my God, I never knew about this. But we knew, and we're not impressed. And we know all their sleight of hands. We know all their little tricks, and we know how to dismantle them without sounding like normies, basically. Like we provide actual arguments and historical perspective and philosophical dismantling of all the premises that these people hold.
Yeah, absolutely. Klaus, were you going to make a point regarding the video that you pulled up here?
No. I just want to show
okay.
you guys that this isn't just like, oh, this is an American issue. Again, this guy, Jared Taylor, American Renaissance editor, was interviewed by a Colombian radio station, March 9, 2017. So again, in a globalized world, you're going to have to deal with issues that might seem very parochial. We might have to deal with Islam at some point in time. We might have to deal with, literally, we might have to deal with Afghani refugees, from what I told you guys from the previous episode, Afghani refugees coming to Colombia. So again, in a very globalized world, you're going to have to deal with issues and arguments and all this type of things that might appear to be very local, but have now gone international. That's all I wanted to say. Just kind of prove to you guys that yes, this guy was actually interviewed in a Colombian radio station.
Yeah, because ultimately what they're spreading is the same philosophical worldview, which is liberalism. It's Anglo-liberalism. It's Darwinism. It's Newtonian physics. It's this imposition of things that are theories as fact. And they all come from England. So it's really like a cultural brainwashing that's being promoted around the world. Because what Godzilla is Cuban and Puerto Rican, and he's on the spectrum, but he thinks he's black, right? He thinks he's black because he grew up from New York, so he's been blackwashed, right? Because the Afro-Saxons pressured him and assimilated him and basically said, you gotta you're in New York, you belong to us now, Beaner boy. And he's judging Dominicans because Dominicans are very proud of being who they are, and they're not gonna. And when a Dominican says I'm not black, they're not saying that they don't have African ancestry. They're saying they're not Black Americans. They're saying that who cares about my African ancestry? I mean, I like it. It's cool. Lets me dance bachata well or whatever. But I'm something else. I'm Dominican. I'm Hispanic. And you have adopted being blackwashed, but you, by doing that, have already adopted the same presuppositions. You're probably a biological determinist. You're probably a materialist. You're probably someone who doesn't account for the metaphysical in any way. We're talking philosophically here. You're a gringo. You're a gringo. You're just a black gringo, which is what's the difference?
And we're trying to rescue people from this sort of mindset. I mean, I guess the best example of this would be Fighter. Fighter did used to have this kind of, okay, I think I'm black, right? Or I don't know. But then Noel came to him with some great arguments, and he talked to him and met up with him, and now he understands that the U.S. kind of the way the U.S. does things doesn't really fit into how he was raised, and so let's not act like this is not important to us. But I don't know if you want to continue with the video. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Well, it's both. It's a part of human body and a whole, and everybody turned around. Is asshole a universal?
Go back another tad bit.
Already discussed, have no significance or meaningful content because.
So he's basically saying here, again, I invite everyone to go watch it, but he's basically saying here that just because somebody puts a label on you doesn't mean you should accept it, because you're accepting the commands of your oppressors. And this is kind of what I've been saying. And a lot of Afro-Saxons, hate me because they say I'm racist. And it's funny because the white people say the same thing. But I'm basically pushing back on both of them, trying to alchemize my people and steal my demographic into theirs when theirs is at a negative reproductive rate and falling apart. And so it's like I'm seeing that misery needs company, and these people are trying to steal our people, steal my cousins into their bullshit. So E. Michael Jones basically kind of talks about this. Like, just because someone calls you something doesn't mean you have to accept it, right? Like, if I'm walking down the street and someone yells out faggot, I'm not going to fucking turn around because I'm not a faggot. And so he kind of makes his example of, like, I went to the bike rally and somebody yelled asshole and everybody turned around. Just because somebody calls you white, some people call me white. Some people may call me black. Some people may call me Asian. I don't give a fuck what people call me. I'm Hispanic. I'm Nicaraguan. I'm Californian. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I am. I'm Caribbean, Mesoamerican. I'm in between. Like, that's what I am. I don't have to accept the commands of my oppressors. And Afro-Saxons, whether they're conscious of it or not, when it comes to promoting this whole Afro-Latino BS, are lending themselves to be proxies to their Anglo massas who don't claim them. Jared Taylor don't claim you, and yet you're still working for his interest when you come in and attack our people and you try to promote your propaganda of your historical experience into our world. Because the reality is you probably want to mix with us. You want a Latina. Anyways, let's keep going.
Racial differences have no effect on behavior or identity, other than what gets projected on them as categories of the mind. Categories of the mind can become universals which determine behavior. I once wrote an article on motorcycle culture in America after visiting the famous biker rally in Sturgis, South Dakota. At the high point of that festival, I was told, someone yelled, "Hey, asshole," and everybody turned around. Is asshole a universal based on a category of nature or a category of the mind? Well, it's both. It's a part of human body and a category of the mind, which gets used as an insult. Why do I bring this up? I'm saying that if you identify as white, you were like the biker who turned around at the biker rally when someone yelled, "Hey, asshole." Because like asshole, white is a derogatory term which allows those in power to deprive those who identify as white of their rights. In the wake of what happened in Charlottesville, it is clear that white is not only a category of the mind, it is also a clearly derogatory term somewhere between deplorable and asshole. Anyone who adopts the term is internalizing the commands of his oppressors and asking for trouble. Compare what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, with what happened in Richmond more recently in the same state. There, the universal was gun owner. And because of that, no one went to jail, in spite of the fact that many of the same people probably showed up at both rallies. The difference lies in the universals which got applied to them. Gun owner is a universal which is based on a category of nature which entails rights still guaranteed by the Constitution. White is a universal which has some insignificant with reality, if we're talking about skin color, shape of nose, etc. But that universal has become a category of the mind, or a fiction, which now gets applied with a political purpose in mind. White people, unlike gun owners, have been deprived of their right to free speech and their right to assemble. Charlottesville is proof of that. This leads me to my conclusion: race is a category of the mind which gets weaponized for political purposes. Thank you.
All right. That brings us to the second segment, which is the response or reply segment. So Jared Taylor has 10 minutes to reply to
Hold on. So I think he's referring to a Second Amendment protest that happened in Richmond sometime after the Charlottesville protests.
No. He's saying that gun owners are a group and they have constitutional rights, and
Yes.
the whites don't. Like whites not a thing.
Yeah, so he's basically saying like, stop identifying as white because it's a trap. And I would agree. I would say black and white are traps.
Now, to kind of provide a bit of a counter argument to this, don't progressives already consider most gun owners to be white supremacists anyway? I know they have legal protection from the Second Amendment. The First Amendment.
Klaus, I think you're getting hung up on an irrelevant detail. He's just making the argument that it makes more sense to identify as a gun owner than as white, because gun owners have they can assemble and they have a right to free speech, and like as Charlottesville approved, like the white group does not have a right to free speech. Like that's all he's saying.
I totally agree with him on that, and that's true, and that's objective.
Gun owners are white. There's correlation, but there's not necessarily no.
No, I'm not saying that they are white. I'm saying that progressive media is still going to paint you as a white supremacist, blah blah. Even if you're a non-white gun owner, so the progressive media.
So. I think it's hard when you see like Black Guns Matter or like Colion Noir. Like there's black gun nuts.
Well, I think we need to move on. Honestly, I think
it's autism. My bad. All right, so let me see if there's any other sort of timestamp. You said, what did Billy say about the timestamp? Timestamp says 2720 EMG lays out his thesis. You guys want to go on that one?
I mean, that would have been more appropriate for the beginning, to be quite honest.
We already heard it, I think.
All right, cool. So Noel also stated 1:13:50. I don't know what that timestamp is about. No, I don't know if you want to.
I don't know either. Just if I put it.
OG the Sambo.
I need an assistant, man. I can't function without an assistant, bro. COVID fucked up everything, and my assistant got married, and now she's about to have a baby. So God bless, congratulations. And now I can't afford one, dude. I don't make enough money like I used to. So
it's okay. I'm here for free. It's all good.
My intern, Klaus, my intern.
All right, let's go.
I believe that as the science of genes progresses, it is inevitable. I would bet the next 20 mortgage payments that the genes associated with differences in temperament, differences in intelligence will not be found to be distributed equally among all the different racial groups. And I see I've come to the end of my 5 minutes, so I do not wish to go overtime.
All right. Thank you for that. Dr. Jones, the final 5 minutes, and please do watch your language. I don't want you to use any words that can harm my channel. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I have to make a statement here. The term chubby lesbian kike is the way Roberta Kaplan characterizes herself. Now, she knows that if she can say that, okay, and she can say that, and everybody will laugh, okay, but if you say it, you will be banned from the internet. This is the type of trap that has been set for all of us here. It's exactly the type of trap that has been set. If I say that the Jews are behind gay marriage, okay, I can get banned from the internet. But if I say, even if I say, this was in Tikkun magazine, this was Amy Dean bragging about the fact that the Jews are behind gay marriage. Okay, even if I say that, I'm in danger. Okay, now this is an intolerable situation here that we have all been put into. This is the war that is going on right now before our eyes, and it's got nothing to do with race. It has to do with the difference between Jews and non-Jews in this culture. Now, if you want to talk about race, look, I've already been through this before. There are definite biological characteristics. I never denied that. Okay. You can also say that it is a fundamental category of current strife at this moment. It is. Of course it is. Race is being mobilized by a certain group of people, but that's precisely the...
Pause it for a second. So this is the kind of like the frustration of maybe Michael Jones with the conversation about race, which is that Michael Jones can recognize, Michael Jones can recognize, as we do, both the, let's say, the biological reality of human differences, vis-a-vis race, but then also the political utilization or the political use of race, which doesn't necessarily overlap or even can be informed. It doesn't even get informed by the biological facts. And so this is the other problem with the people like Jared Taylor, is that they want to deny the political nature of race, and they want to just base it on biology, on stupid stuff, when it's like, no, it's both. It's like, yeah, you can talk about whatever, like the general characteristics of Europeans, if there are any, which there probably are, and then how do you handle that politically? Which again, it's this thing that people like Jared Taylor never address. They're always about like my science, but what's interesting is like my politics. It's like, what are the politics that should be derived from your my science? And so again, like here it is. E. Michael Jones, he's not what racialists would call a race denier, because EMJ is not he's not an idiot. He's just arguing like, dude, like you're being played, because you're talking about, you're over here talking about your charts and stuff, and then all the people that are using race as politically are just running circles around you, which is true.
And to add to that, it is very true that at least in the United States, there is a big public taboo when it comes to discussing what industries Jews dominate in and what that effect on mainstream society would be, which is not really normal for other countries, although the U.S. is trying to export that. I think just yesterday or 2 days ago, I was in a Colombian space on Twitter, which is a sort of like a live stream where anyone can join, and they were talking about Judaism. And this Colombian Jewish guy, he was, one of the stereotypical academic Jews, very well learned. He's super smart. He was just talking and talking about Judaism to an audience that doesn't quite understand it. And very candidly and with no sort of shame or whatever, he just said, like, yeah, Jews run Hollywood. And, Jews were the bankers in the medieval Christian era. Now, of course, when he was talking about the medieval Christian era, he was more saying that, Jews were being discriminated, and so they were kind of stuck to these positions because Christians were not allowed to be usurious, but for Jews it was fine, so they were able to open banks. But when he mentioned Hollywood, he's like, yeah, absolutely, Jews run Hollywood, and they're overrepresented. And people were, and people in the space, obviously they weren't anti-Semitic, they were like, yeah, that's kind of great, these Jews, they're such hardworking, and they dominate industries wherever they go, and we should admire that and kind of aspire to be like them. But in the U.S., it's obviously not possible to even say that. You'd be chased out of polite society for even suggesting that Jews run Hollywood. But anyways, I wanted to introduce Carlos into the panel. Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, long time no see. Is that the
Coño, está el hombre. ¿Dónde te has perdido, primito?
Yeah, I know, right? But I don't know. In regards to the question of Jews and Hollywood, I mean, I think that the golden age of, I'm sorry if I'm deviating the topic here, but it's just like a small deviation. The golden age of Hollywood is like this mix between like it's basically like Austrian Empire exile culture, it's like this mix between Jews and Catholics, and which is basically the golden age of Hollywood, and
like when they made Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. I even like more films like that. But the golden age of Hollywood is basically like this shaking of hands of Jews and Catholics to make movies. You know what I mean?
Jews used to make good movies.
No, I agree.
They're part of the rot in their more recent movies. Is just the general rot of society, of Anglo-American society. So it's like,
no, it's just an expression of, it's just like an expression of what Anglo-Americans like,
exactly.
And so yeah, I mean, and it was like this expression, and at that time in the 50s, 40s, 30s, the golden age of Hollywood and all of that, it was like most exiles of the Austro-Hungary Empire,
Yeah.
And I think we need to a certain extent value Austro-Hungary, because it was great. But sorry if I am like deviating from
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
from the
yeah. So
topic.
Marcus Cicero was about to leave, and so you wanted to give us some parting words.
Yeah, sure. Basically, I mean, if anybody's listening to this, and they're curious about Jared Taylor, I mean, EMJ's right when he says that Taylor, he's been around for 30 years, something like that, maybe even closer to 40 at this point. I mean, his thesis is pretty much black people in America are dumb. Black people in America steal and commit violent crime. I mean, there's nothing really special about what he talks about. Um, like we said in the beginning, it's just one of those things where you have to look at like, and then what? Like, what's his end game? Like, what does he bring to the table about the issues we face as a society, right? Like, what does he? This is a Hispanic chat, right? A Hispanic group. What does he bring to the table for Hispanics? For me, it's what does he bring to the table for Slavs? Nothing. None of these people do. They're running their little hustle. Uh, they present their little graphs and their charts and all that nonsense, but then there's nothing else that comes of it. I mean, we can talk about differences between the races or ethnicities, forever. But what else are we going to do with that information? It's you just hit a wall with these people. That's really about it. I mean, don't pay these people any mind. They're trying to use you. They're trying to bring you in to bolster their numbers. Like I said in the very beginning of the show, it's like whiteness now is like going into a party after the cops have raided it and they're arresting everybody. Why do you want to show up now?
Because we was Romans and Romans was whites.
Because
Also,
we gotta say the white race, bruh.
I mean, Taylor is extremely Hispanophobic.
Oh yeah, he's Black Legend guy. He's a Anglophiliac Black Legend guy, of course.
No, yeah, and I think like I don't know why like a Hispanic will be like oriented towards him. It's just
Because
like
he talks shit about blacks, and so like he shows empirically
no,
that
yeah, I
blacks are
know.
inferior. That's
No,
why.
yeah, I mean like one of the ways, like I mean like it's the same way that us like some like Italians or like Italians like or Irish assimilated into like U.S. white culture, right? Like which is basically through anti-blackness, right? But I mean, why will you want to be a cock in the end? Like that's the main question. Why will you be a cock for your own identity and even call yourself a conservative? You're just being an extreme cock, and that I think that's just the most pathetic like nature, like the most pathetic state that you can be as a person. Just to be an extreme cock.
Yeah.
And you're
I think
you're just like reduced to that, and I think that's the most pathetic thing that you can do.
Yeah.
to answer your question, I think it mostly has to do with the fact that people perceive people as Jared Taylor as some sort of bulwark against third worldism. And because if Jared Taylor says that blacks are violent and people see that in their lives, they're going to tell, oh, well, this guy's telling the truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And I don't want my neighborhood to be crime ridden and all that. So maybe he's got something interesting to say and that type of thing. And that's how they kind of get to you.
Well, Marcus, we kind of stole your thunder a little bit. So.
Oh no, you're good. No, you guys are right. I mean, it's and Jared Taylor's old school Anglo. I mean, it's something with the Anglo. It's something in their soul on a metaphysical level where they try to level and destroy other cultures, right? They try to bring it down to a lower common denominator, right? So that's what whiteness really is. It's like take every single type of European descended, and nowadays white means outside of Europe as well, and destroy the cultures, destroy the religions, and just make it into some kind of blob that has no real history behind it, no culture, nothing unifying it. That's
well,
really.
If there's one thing that unifies it, it's like running away the second a black person moves through their neighborhood. But that's about it.
Crying when there's Mexican people in the apartment complex pool.
Yeah, it's shit like that, and it's like, why do you want to do this?
Yeah, I gotta note. Well,
I mean, there's like a phrase. Sorry if I interrupted you, Tercio, but
Yeah.
there's this phrase of Nicolas Gomez Davila that I find like quite good, like great for this discussion, which is si los europeos renuncian a sus particularismos para procrear al buen europeo, temamos que solo engendren a otro norteamericano.
Damn.
And it's basically what we've been saying, and even what Billy or Guillermo have been saying, you know, and even like Michael Jones have been saying, right? Which is like, and it's just like this bland white identity is in the end is just it's shitty, you know. It's just like
which didn't really even need to happen because the U.S. is diverse enough that people who are of European background, they could have assimilated into their local sort of American geographical culture. So say, for example, if you're a Slav and you live in Alabama, then, you know, you would adapt, you know, the Southern ethnicity, I guess you could say. Or, you know, if you're a Spaniard, if you go to the Northwest, you would become a Pacific Northwesterner and that type of thing. Because there's a lot of America bashing in here, and I understand it. But as an outsider, as someone who wasn't born in the U.S. and was, you know, raised a year or two in the U.S., I can still tell that there is a culture. And it's not just Walmart. I know you guys are talking shit, but there's also, you know, there's the rodeo, there's the, what do you call it, the flea markets, there's, you know, the after Sunday, after church sort of barbecues and that type of thing. So there is an Americana that those of European ancestry could have clinged on to, but for whatever reason that just didn't happen, and everyone just became a suburban white who doesn't know what they are. So I don't know what happened there.
Well, that's the problem.
I think we agree that suburbs are basically the destruction of civilization.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's the even like the Republican Party, right? I mean, you see the expression in the sort of like race, like dog whistle, right? When Trump mentioned that blacks are going to black like BLM are going into the suburbs, you know, and that kind of stuff, you know. And just to defend the suburbs seems.
Yeah, that's a huge Tucker Carlson like talking point where he does monologues about where he's like, we gotta save the suburbs.
We must secure the suburbs and ensure a future for future white cocks or whatever.
No, we must secure the existence of
suburbia,
of bland middle class people, and a future for their obese children. It's getting late for me, so I wanted to comment on something regarding race realism and the way they construct it, which is very like, again, I'm not denying that there are differences between humans. I'm criticizing the way they construct their argument, and that they always show you, like, especially Jared Taylor, they always show you stuff like crime rates. It's like, see, you know, blacks have they have higher crime rates, and whites have lower crime rates, and blacks have whatever higher illegitimacy crime rate, and whites have lower ones. But this is meaningless because he's just talking about, like, this is not an essential argument. Like he has to make first the theoretical connection between the particular race and crime, or having illegitimate children, which he doesn't do. He just makes like a naive correlation in the present, and like, yeah, we got data for the last 50 years, and it shows that blacks and whites are different on this. And it's like, okay, but you're making an essentialist argument. You're making that this is, you can boil this down to the genetic level. Where's the work? Where's the due diligence to prove that this crime rate is perfectly associated or correlated to this essential genetic makeup? He doesn't. He just throws it out there. It's like, yeah, okay, there's a difference now, and therefore that difference is essential. And that way they also muddy the waters on what's political and what's biological or essential. And he's basically arguing, like, there's nothing political that we can do about blacks, about black crime rate or illegitimacy. There's nothing we can do. It's genetic. So we might as well just separate or ship them back to Africa. That is a very dishonest, very bad philosophy take. Just like the worst, it's like the worst vices of English thought, of like naive empiricism, just like having no theoretical basis for what you're doing. Don't even having a definition. There's no due diligence in this at all. It's just like facts. It's like, yeah, blacks commit more crime. It's like, okay, yeah, we can recognize that. We're not stupid American people with the taboo. We can say, okay, yeah, blacks are a problem with crime. What do we do about it? Is this essential? Is this tied to being black? Like, are black people condemned?
Well, sorry if I'm like memeing at this point, but I think like blacks and even like Hispanics, when when people accuse us of like being narcs and shit, we just need to embrace it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm a fucking narc. I'm a fucking like narco like loyalist and royalist and carlist. You know what I mean?
Narco futurism.
Or like, yeah, that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? And that's like and it's sort of like the feeling that especially now with the crisis of masculinity that is going on right now. I remember like this text, like this book of like Norman Mailer, which wasn't like this leftist, but it was like still like a masculine guy from the 60s. It was like anti-Vietnam and shit. And he wrote this book. I don't quite remember the name of the book, so of the title, sorry, but it was basically like embracing black, like liking like the nature of like black masculinity. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can do the same thing with Hispanics. You know what I mean? Like in a moment of like crisis of masculinity, I think like the like a subterfuge that we can find is just like that sort of like narc culture that of course has like detrimental values and all of that, but it maintains sort of
something, some kind of logos.
yeah, it even sounds like extremely bizarre and like it's controversial, and I agree that it's a bad thing. It still maintains that sort of like,
it's not ideal.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's
agree. I think certain people, like, you know, like I think of somebody like Pablo Escobar. Like, yeah, he was a bad guy, right? You know what I'm saying? And we shouldn't look at him like it's like in the book of Judges, right? Like in the Bible when it talks about the book of Judges, and it says like, and you know, everybody was like their own ruler and like nobody followed the rules or whatever. And it was just like slim pickings, bro. And like all the judges are like flawed heroes, right? They're not like great people. And I think you know, people like a Carlos Letter who was crazy, but like he did have some views that I would describe as being something of a passionary. You know, like Carlos Letter did see his narco trafficking as the H-bomb to America's nuclear weapon. Like, you know, Colombia, Latin America didn't have nuclear weapons, but it had cocaine, and he saw it as a means of warfare in a sense.
Also like the notion of like there's like some sort of like patrimonial notion that is still maintained in
patriarchal.
Yes,
not only patriarchal but also patrimonial to a certain extent, and personal.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I'm just thinking that I don't know, people that whose heroes were basically like pirates or were like revolutionaries they can't throw stones into like people that commit crime. It's like, oh, how very convenient of you that you are now outraged by whatever crime, and then, you know, Sir Francis Drake.
No,
you know?
yeah.
And the Wild West, don't forget the Wild West. They idolize that or fetishize.
Yeah.
And we was Vikings.
And we was Vikings.
And we was Vikings.
And we was Vikings. So it's again, it's all very like, oh, blacks commit more crime, and it's like, okay, but we was Vikings, we was pirates. It's like, why does that, like, what are you trying to say, Jared? What are you saying?
They there's no the idea that there's something I can say that there's something like even like from the now that is basically dead Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-American culture, you know, that like Hamiltonian tradition, you know, the Cavaliers and all of that. That's all dead. you know, we're not going back to that, you know, on like the Anglo notion of law and order, that sort of stuff. That is dead, you know. That's basically dead. And even like it's not like white Americans like still maintain that, you know. That's not true at all. And as opposed to us Hispanics, that we still maintain this sort of like a, there's still a Hispanic ethos, even if it is diluted. There still is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Caballería, claro, claro.
Sí.
Yeah, to a certain
Man.
extent.
We still persecute corrupt people, you know. It's like it's codified in law still. Like
But
it's part of the.
yeah, but also like there's like people that want to LARP as like the defenders of the Anglo-Saxon race. It's like we're not going back to that, you know. There's no possibility, you know. There's no return, you know. And I think people like like Jared Taylor relies a lot of that and on that, and a lot of American conservatives, especially like Paolo Cons, still believe in that. Still believe in the American Gothic, which is like Pat Buchanan, for example. And yeah, sure, there's something attractive if you see it from this point of view of the American Gothic, but just at the same time, yeah, you know, it's not. First, it's not going back, and second, like, yeah, second is just like that was also like there was like the seeds of decadence were growing there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Man, all this Hispanic talk. Yeah, just a quick point. All this Hispanic talk on drugs, man. We're gonna get raided by the DA real soon.
No, no, but I think what Carlos is saying is correct, because they have nothing to go back to, because they're like it's like they're 15 minutes in the sun in world history has just been like error after error. So it's like if they were gonna like go back to something, it's like they would have to go back when they were irrelevant. It's like there's no going back to like, oh, we're going back to the glorious time when we were giving opium to the Chinese, you know? Oh, we're going back to the glorious time when we were destabilizing South America. There's no going, like they have to go back to like, oh,
when we removed the commons from the peasants and forced them into cities and made their children work 16 more days.
It's over. It's over. Like it's
we're going back to King Arthur time, you know.
Exactly. That's when that's where they have to go back.
Yeah, they have to go really far back. They have to go back.
Have to go. Yeah, you have to go back more than 500 years.
Yeah.
Way more. And so
when they were kind of Catholic, right? Were they Catholic at that time?
Sure.
Yeah, they were Catholic. Yeah, they were Catholic. But it's over. So it's over.
Well, and I say us, even though, you know, 200 years ago is the dawn of liberalism in Hispanoamerica and the republics were born. I feel like that kind of operated at a like at a top level, but like the day to day, like the folk, for lack of a better word, has kind of maintained the essence of, you know, the time before that. And I think it's really changed post Vatican II, I would say. Like in the last 50 years is where we've begun to be disconnected from that living ethnos, from that living tradition. And I'm not saying that the ethnos is dead and that tradition is dead. I don't think so. But, you know, it's dying. We're deracinate with those roots. They're still alive. They're still green, but there's a lot of stuff, you know, kind of covering them up from the sun. There's a lot of stuff destroying them. Does that make sense?
But like if we compare that to like the Anglos, right? Like the Americans, it's like,
yeah, we're closer. I mean, for us, it's like we're gonna go back, like, and we're not going back, but I'm saying like we're gonna go back a generation, right? At most, right? It's basically like the pre-boomers, like
before democracy, before liberal democracy.
But when my mom was a child, like she went to church and it was in Latin, and it wasn't like a thing. That was just like how church was, right? Like the women wore veils walking to church on Sunday. Like that wasn't that long ago. My mom was born in 1954. So it wasn't that long ago. You You know what I'm saying? So it's like we're a little bit it's not far from us. I get it, and I'm saying this hopefully that kind of inspires people to not let go, to grip on right a little bit tighter.
And we're still producing, like, and that's the thing, like we also have a project because we're still defending ourselves from 500 centuries of slander. So there's plenty of things like that we can defend, that we can clean up. With the Anglos, it's like they already got their best stuff, like their best propaganda out, and it's like it's over. It's like it was debunked. It's kind of like the opposite. It's like people only know the worst about the Hispanic world, and they already know the best about the Anglo world. And now the roles are switching, because now it's like, okay, so now let's see what's under, let's see what's under your bed, Anglo man.
I would argue, ironically, that like the descendants of the people that crafted the Black Legend propaganda, eventually, due to the tides that were changing with liberalism, getting more advanced into the way it is now, they used this exact same sort of shit to basically, deconstruct the entire Anglo-Saxon identity. And, now this is where they're at, basically.
What do you mean?
So in terms of like, I'm talking about like the same sort of like intellectuals who would have created Black Legend propaganda, their intellectual progeny has now basically completely taken over universities and are just like destroying Anglo-Saxon society in a certain way.
Exactly.
In terms of like talking about colonialism in the past, like now they're creating Black legends that sometimes even exaggerate how bad like the British were even in the past.
Exactly. Yeah, the guns are pointed towards themselves now.
Yeah,
they're pointing the guns to themselves. Yeah. So yeah, we got this constructive project, and I mean, just look at the white race stuff. They have to appropriate like fucking like they have to take, Greco-Roman world. It's like what does England have to do with the Greco-Roman world? It's like, first of all, they didn't have anything to do with it as it was happening, and second, they rejected it 500 years ago. They like straight up said like, nah, we don't care about this project. We're gonna do our own thing. So yeah, it's like that. I gotta go, guys, but I wanted to leave with a couple comments just so you guys don't forget. Jared Taylor made some comments about Ethiopia being as Christian as Germany, which are just like preposterous. like historically and right now, it's like a shallow search on Wiki. I'm not an expert on Ethiopia, but just Wikipedia would debunk that claim by Jared Taylor, which is a very dishonest claim to say that Christianity had no role in civilizing Europe, because Black people Christian and Black people inferior still. And so that one is, it's a very important thing. Like he just made just bad faith comparisons, and he says also something that the West, it's not only Christian, but it's look at the Greco-Roman, right? Like the Greeks and the Romans built great civilizations, and they built it before Christianity, and we carry, the West, quote unquote, carries that legacy, that torch. And it's like, hey Jared, the West, quote unquote, carries that torch because the church, Christianity, preserved it. Because if it hadn't preserved it, my Vikings would have my Vikings and my Muslims would have destroyed everything of that Greco-Roman world. So yeah, it's just a bunch of like nonsense. Just because he cannot go above the atomic race level, he cannot go above we're all atoms and electrons, we're all genes. Because as soon as he goes, he takes a step above that, his entire project just collapses.
But guys, I feel like when these like Anglos talk about being the inheritors of the Greco-Roman world, it's just like the way the Jacobins appropriated Roman law and culture and shit, which they basically created this extreme like Frankenstein, which was just a degenerate shit going on. And that was basically the appropriation of like the Jacobins of Roman culture. You know, they created like a Frankenstein shit, you know, going on, which basically destroyed political science and law, and to a certain extent. And this is the same thing. This is just the same thing, you know. They just the Anglos LARPing as the Roman, the inheritors of Rome and Greece are just like the Jacobins LARPing as the inheritors of Rome. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, they're totally disconnected from it because Rome itself was changed. Was like I don't know if the word is transmutated, but it went from pagan to Catholic. You know, it became Christian. It's where the church was established and grew out of. So
It's just you got to remember that even when you argue that Britain was Romanized and all that, that was lost kind of lost after the Anglo-Saxons, like the actual Anglo-Saxons, because the Anglo-Saxons were not originally from Britain. That when the Anglo-Saxons invaded, and it's like we have Britain today because the Catholic Church, but there's that romanization process was aborted.
But I think like I'm not like of course I have like as a Hispanic, I have the moral and even the aesthetic imperative to be Anglophobic, right? But there's Anglophobia. There are limits to Anglophobia. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And,
of
like,
course. I'm not gonna throw Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or King Arthur in the trash just because like my Anglos or whatever. And
no, exactly.
I'm speaking English, right?
Of course, and the nature of dissident culture in England was Catholic. You know.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We can't also throw out Chesterton. I know you don't really like him that much, but we're talking about throwing him in the trash. Yeah, there's no. Our Anglophobia is very concrete. It's not essentialist. Even it's not essentialist. It's not something that we ascribe like, oh, they're always going to be like this. It's the last 500 years. We have a problem with the last 500 years, and we have a problem with the fact that they have slandered us. That's why we single them out so thoroughly. Even though we also may have conflicts with the French, and we may have problems with German idealism and stuff like that. But it's like this like the conflict is happening in this continent, and it's going on still. It's been going on for 500 years at this point, and so we're just acknowledging that conflict.
Not only that, but there are literally like British like Catholic writers that have very, very similar critiques of the UK that we're saying here today right now. If that makes sense.
Exactly.
Isn't Tolkien one of them actually?
He probably is, but I was thinking more like that guy who wrote like the Jesuits in North America. I think it was Parkman. I know he's a guy that says something very similar. And there's a few handful of authors that are Catholic British, and like we're not obviously happy with the fact that they switched to Anglicanism because their king wanted to remarry, and then they got the consequences of that.
Yeah.
And I mean like also like the nature of Anglicanism. It's not like there's a lot of like high church Anglo Catholics and shit, but
yeah,
they need to be aware that Anglicans in a certain period of time they basically embrace Calvinism.
Yeah.
So it's complicated for Anglo Catholics that like to talk about like, oh yeah, tradition and shit.
Yeah, so any good Catholic that is British is my brother. But the angle like political, and again, like we have to make distinctions between individual and political. We have no problem with like individual Anglos or whatever. We're recognizing as a political conflict. We're not making this individual about individuals. We're not making this about you and your, maybe about Borges and his British grandmother, and we're renouncing Jorge Luis Borges because he was part British. It's not about that. It's political. It's recognizing, listen, there's all this problems, theological problems, political problems, sociological problems, and imperial problems that we have to deal with, and that's it. And that's it, really. You know?
Yeah, we're not going. I mean, I don't know you guys, but I tend to not like Jesus Maestro a lot. And we're not going like autistically like Jesus Maestro type of like Anglophobia, you know what I mean? Which is funny and you can do like memes about it, but like I don't know.
I mean, I would argue that Anglo culture, which is essentially liberalism, is bad for Anglos. You know, like right now when Klaus was talking about Sargon, I'm not really familiar with these guys' words. But when you told me that Sargon doesn't like the French and would rather Afro-Saxons come to England than French people.
Yes, he embraces Jamaicans. He would embrace a Jamaican way more than a white Frenchman.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me, and that makes me like that kind of in a weird way. It was kind of like white pilling, like, oh, they're still sensible Anglos on some level, right? Like, they haven't necessarily, completely disconnect them. And I think the Brits do a better job than the Americans. I'll say that much.
Well, most immigrants to the UK are like, people from the colonies outside of like Slavs. So that actually makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to obviously clarify that he's a super liberal. Like he's classical liberals of 101. But Europeans,
I don't think like it's different, right? It's not what the British did in Pakistan was different from what the Spaniards did in America.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So it's not like.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is hold on.
So the point I was trying to get at is that Europeans themselves, born and raised Europeans, they still have a sense of I'm French, I'm German. Yeah, we have this European Union thing, and we're all Europeans. Yeah, whatever. But they they acknowledge their ethnicity a lot. It's not like America at all.
Yeah, they have an ethnic sense of self. Like even like go to Belgium, the Walloons and the Flemish, right? Like there's two sides of Belgium. So they don't lose sight of that stuff.
Yeah. I was going to say, what's his name? Eric Stryker. He threw a giant fit, I remember, a while back because basically when he heard about his like Hispanicity from like Zero Schizo from that one video we did, right? He basically was like, so basically like these Spaniards are like these British like right wingers that only want like their non-white like colonies to come and like basically replace the indigenous people of like their respective country. So he like played this game basically where like where it's like, and it's to me, it's like totally dishonest, right? Because like, it makes sense why people from British colonies, in my opinion, would move to Britain. And it makes sense why, people from the Spanish colonies might move to Spain and vice versa. But I don't know. To me, it was just dumb that he thought that this was like some horrible like scandal.
Well, yeah.
Surprised me from him.
Well, if you don't want black Caribbeans in your country, then you shouldn't colonize them. Well, what am I going to say, man?
Yeah,
exactly.
and that's the thing, because my grandmother is Anglo-Caribbean, right? Or was. She's deceased now, and she had some rather, Anglo, not mannerisms, but some cultural thing. Like we used to eat soda cake, Johnny Kiek, pitiel, right?
You gotta leave the stream now. I'm sorry, Klaus. You gotta go.
Wagwan Thursday, whole things, man.
One drop rule.
Sergio, you're like Venezuelan, so you probably have like some Trinitarian like great grandmother.
What, me?
Some Indian, Canadian.
No, I'm 100% Spanish phenotype, Bavarian phenotype. No, not a drop of Trinitarian in me.
What's interesting about Venezuela is that actually like all the like Caribbean, like Dutch and Caribbean, like English, that part of the Caribbean, they went to Venezuela, and all the like middle class intellectuals actually went to Venezuela to study and make money. So that's an interesting fact,
That's true.
Guys, I want to just read this real quickly because it was actually a comment about the debate, which I think is relevant. So Eric Stryker posted this on Telegram like right after the debate, and it says this: E. Michael Jones is objectively wrong that race is a Protestant/Jewish, etc. social construct. It could be argued that Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, who expelled all Moors and Jews after the Reconquista, were the first racialists. They believed heresy was inherited. What are your responses to that take?
Can I go first? Can I go first? I want to go to bed.
Yeah, go. I gotta sleep soon too, Tercio. Yeah, go.
Okay. So first of all, he's retarded because Judaism and Islam is not a heresy. A heresy is basically you have to be part of the group that needs to accept a set of doctrines and then deviate, like not accept a part of doctrine. That's heresy. So if you're Catholic and somebody from a Taoist, a Buddhist is not a heretic for Catholicism. Okay. So he doesn't know that. And second of all, oh my God, like again, this is the problem with these people, which they don't recognize the political dimensions of the word race in the present and in the past. But most importantly, they need like in the past. So when the Jews and the Moors, the Muslims, were kicked out of Spain, it wasn't racial. It was political. It was for political reasons, and they were basically treated as a political class, which very conveniently you could have the heuristic of ancestry to sort of like identify potential political subversives, right? But the idea it was not racial at all, because he also these people, it's so enraging because it's like the policy was not expulsion alone, it was conversion or expulsion.
Well, and a lot of these Moors were like genetically Spanish too.
That's also yeah, that's also the other thing. It's like they think that they were just completely separate groups. Like no, this included genetically as Spaniards. Of course, the Spanish wouldn't know about genetics, but they knew about ancestry.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, because some of the Mo-based Celt Ibrians converted to Islam when it was politically expedient to do so.
Many
exactly. and so they were treated. These were political categories, and we already talked about it. But it's good to at the end of this, well, the end dish of the stream, to say it again. People in the past had no concept of biology. Okay, they saw differences. We would call them now biological differences, but biology was not a thing in the past. So they were not thinking in biological terms. They were thinking in other terms. Okay, they would see differences in physiognomy or whatever you want to call it, physical differences and all of that. But this type of policy that the Spanish Empire enacted, and pureza de sangre as well, because many people just don't get past the title or past the name of the policy, pureza de sangre, and they think like, oh, see, Puritanism, one drop rule is the same thing. It's like no, it was political. It wasn't like the Spanish Empire was not a modern, progressive, multicultural, race blind empire. Okay, liberal thing. It was a very much empire of its time. The difference is that it did not ascribe essential characteristics to people. Okay, and whenever discrimination, exclusion, whatever happened, it was on political terms. Okay, because they were not stupid and they didn't want to have potential subversives in positions of power. Same with pureza de sangre in the Americas. They were not going to hand over positions of authority to recently converted pagans that they didn't really know what they were going to do, right? Like they didn't even know, they couldn't guarantee that the conversions were legitimate, that they had really renounced paganism, that they had understood Catholicism. It's
isn't that super reasonable?
It's super reasonable. But these
actually, we should go back. Like, there's a bunch of like new like American Catholic converts to Catholicism, especially because of political reasons.
Yes.
You've seen a bunch of like Roy person shit. We should go back to that distinction between like all
yes.
So we shouldn't trust like all this like why Anglo Saxons like converting to Catholicism,
Yes. So totally sensible, logical decisions, not based on race as we understand race today, or as people like Eric Stryker understand it today. And this is the fallacy that they always commit, is that they project their not even modern understandings, but their particular understandings of race onto the past. and they're seeing, like, just like progressives, they go back in history and they see racism everywhere. They also go back and see racism everywhere. The difference is that they think is racism is cool, so they think it's like, see, based. Isabella was a racist. Queen Isabella was a racist, so the Spaniards were based. Whereas, like, a progressive would go like, oh my God, look at the horrible Spanish, how horribly bigoted they were, and it's just nonsense. It was political, and you can see how it was political in the way that pureza de sangre in the Americas did not evolve into one drop rule, or forever, again, essentialist assignments to people, but it evolved into basically mejorar la raza, which was that people would get into the better political category. You could get into whiteness, you could buy whiteness. It was political.
Well, notice how politically they can kind of control what your opinion on certain Muslims are supposed to be. So, like, what do I mean as an example? Well, the media will tell you that Palestinians are terrorists. The media and like these institutions will say that Islamic Spain was awesome. There was just, everyone was just so happy, everybody involved. Then they'll say the Taliban is like the worst thing that ever happened in existence. And then you got to feel bad for the Uyghur Muslims in China. They can do this to all sorts of different groups all the time, and it's entirely fucking cynical.
Yep.
I think to follow what Tercio was, or Tercio, you wanted to finish your point? Or
No, I was saying that was a great point. I hadn't thought about it.
I want to say that to follow what Tercio was saying is that, of course, like they deal with like this is the same issue. Like there's a lot of like the academics that like to attribute like to Spain to like Isabella and Ferdinand like some sense of like racialist ideals, which is not true. I'm not going to repeat what Tercio said. I agree with him, but also like we're talking about Isabella, the queen that basically commanded the natives to marry the Spaniards, and the Spaniards to marry the natives. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. But they'll cope and claim that, like, oh, well, Spanish people that are pure were always at the top, yada, 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 even though, like, that wasn't really the case. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, class played a big role, and we've covered that. Is there anything you guys want to wrap up as a response to the debate? And I think I'm ready to kind of land the plane here. Any final thoughts, Tercio, before you go? Billy, Carlos, Klaus?
Stop falling for stop falling for thinking that history is a set of pictures. It's a process. Like you cannot just like take a picture of history or take a picture of the present and just assume that history works that way. Mestizaje was not a thing that happened once and then like, oh, we made a party. It was a process that took hundreds of years, and we can talk about it and celebrate it now. But that doesn't mean that in the meantime, as it was happening, it was like everybody was like on board all the time and like, yeah. Same with the race or whatever, discrimination, whatever you want to call it. You have to look at it from the perspective both of the people involved at that time and history as a process. Things just don't happen like pictures. Like you took a picture and now we're in the Enlightenment, and you took another picture and now it's World War II. It's like, no, it's all a process. So don't fall for this very shallow and naive interpretation or way to look at history, which is like as if it was just a set of pictures, like a PowerPoint slide. Like we have this slide and then we have this next slide.
Or through graphs and like haplogroups as well.
Yeah, same slides. It's like taking a picture.
That's true.
I guess to end on something, I'm always going to be the Shilmer. Give a like, subscribe, comment, share. We're on podcasts too, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, everywhere you have a podcast platform, we're there. Give the homie, OG a follow if you haven't already, because, some of them view, don't subscribe. So, what's up with that? Come on, man.
There's a lot of that. I just wanted to... Yeah, go ahead.
I just want, sorry for memeing, but I actually want to like talk and discuss about the idea of like the new Christians and all Christians. I think we should come back with that and like assume like the superiority of us Hispanics as all Christians against these like new converted Anglos.
I like that.
We should like talk about this idea a lot more.
Limpieza de sangre. Yeah, I like that. We'll save that for a future episode. Again, I just want to encourage everybody, check out that debate. It's definitely a classic debate where a lot of things come to surface. I think you can't watch that and not be confirmed in the notion of this thing that we call jam culture. Jared Taylor very much is the epitome of that. You see, biological determinism, reductivism, materialism, nominalism. You see all these things that we talk about, and you see it contrast with a Catholic worldview that EMJ shares. So I definitely encourage everybody to watch it. There's just so many self-owns. It's even comical at sometimes that you can't believe how Jared Taylor owns himself when he's trying to prove his points, but he doesn't care. He likes I suspect Jared Taylor gets a check from Benai Brith or something along those lines. But anyways, anything else, you guys? Klaus, would you like to say anything about the debate?
It was a very interesting debate, and it was long overdue. These two men are members of the dissident right, so to speak. Obviously, they're very different branches of the dissident right, but it's always great to have debates like this. I wish YouTube was more permissive of them. They had to do it on D Live and then post it on Odyssey first. But
right,
I mean, to be more neutral and more just meta analysis about it. I think hopefully your channel also could be able to host debates of this caliber. I think I'll really appreciate that.
I would love to debate people, dude. Nobody wants to debate me. Like nobody on the Latinx side, nobody on the pick me side, no wignets, no nignets. Nobody wants to debate me, bro, because I'm persuasive as fuck.
Well, tomorrow we're gonna have a debate with a Colombian progressive, so we're gonna see how that goes.
Right,
it's gonna be a very interesting talk.
Tomorrow we have an episode. It's not really a debate; it's more a discussion. I'm not gonna debate it.
Yeah, that's true.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who this girl is and what people can expect to see tomorrow?
So we're gonna have a discussion with a girl I met on a Twitter space. She's a Colombian progressive. Her name is Juliana Beltran, and she's kind of aligned herself with the progressive part of Colombian politics. So feminism, LGBTQ rights, social, economic, progressive economics, and that type of thing. And I wanted Noelle to talk to her because I feel like she's going down a path that American women and Western women already traversed about 10 years ago. And, there's this kind of thing that I've kind of postulated that feminism leads to two end destinations. Either you become a sexual commodity, which it's funny how the feminists say that the patriarchy turns women into sex objects, but feminism does that even more. And the second road is that you're going to be inevitably replaced by trans women if you kind of buy into this narrative of the patriarchy and you're oppressing me and the oppression this and oppression that. So women end up being actually the biggest losers of feminism, and the biggest winners of feminism are coomers and pharma companies that want to pill you up and turn you into a woman. But she thinks it's all about, but men and women should be equal and we should be treated the same and that type of thing. And, there's things about feminism that, I can understand, especially Hispanic feminism. I mean, yeah, there is some violence against women that obviously we're all against. I don't think feminism is the answer to that, but their concerns are understandable.
Well, how are you supposed to show women you love them if you don't hit them, bro? Come on.
I actually believe that I don't.
There's some truth to that.
I don't believe in debates. I don't believe in in the notion that there's a possibility to change others' opinions.
Yeah.
Especially Rancho and I, we might disagree in certain aspects of gender politics. But I don't feel like a feminist will have a good discussion with Rancho, in regards to feminism.
Well, I wouldn't write her off. I think she's just, an average cute Colombian chick with the ideals that are basically shoved down her throat without her realizing it. So I'm just gonna have, you know, an open discussion. It's gonna be in Spanish, just like I'm talking to my little girl cousin or something like that, and just try to kind of get her to realize the BS that she's promoting.
You should.
We'll see how it goes.
But Carlos, debates nowadays are more not about convincing the other person, but convincing the audience.
No,
and
yeah,
that's why we're doing it in Spanish, so we can show it to other Hispanic feminists and be like, hey, you know, this is where it's going if you don't stop
I
us.
think also, I think like I want to say two more things. One in regards about the topic of like feminism and all of that, and one in regards to like debates and people that might be interesting to debate or just have a discussion with. I think there's like what is the name of this? Oh, in regards to feminism, I mean, what feminism promotes is like another form of liberalism, another form of atomization. Is basically like feminism. What they basically promote like getting women out of there. Like the main program of feminism has been historically to get women out of the community and make the state the only regulator between her and, you know, basically made the state his father, you know.
Yes, of course, take the role of the man.
Exactly. So, and this is very like a libertarian take, but I think they're correct in this in this point. But and in regards to like people that you should like debate or have a discussion with, I've been like promoting like the idea of like having a discussion with this guy like Infrared, you know.
Yeah. I'm down. I'd be down.
And I think he's like he's Anglo pill, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny how that's caught on.
No, yeah, and I think it'll be a discussion worth having. He's a very knowledgeable guy, you know, and it's an interesting guy, and I think we can have like we can share ideas with him, you know, share like.
I'm trying to have a discussion with him. I really haven't seen much of his content except for that clip where he's like yelling at some Anglo kid, and somebody kind of made a cartoon out of it on the internet. But yeah,
I think he's like he's not a full blown Dungeness, but he's influenced by Dungenism, you know, and that's interesting.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'm back. I'm gonna be focusing on putting more content out, even though it seems like I'm getting busier with work, but I'll try to make it work. Yeah, we'll talk and we'll try to get some stuff coming, more stuff coming soon, Carlos, and we'll catch up. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think it'll be great. It's great to have you back, and I think it's like content like yours in English is fundamental because there's like, you know, like white supremacism in the U.S. is like a Hispanic movement for some reason.
Yes, exactly.
And I think we need to fight back that kind of shit.
Yes, totally. Okay, you guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Join us tomorrow as we have another episode coming up, and I think Klaus, Saturday, are we going to do like Hispano Weekly? Is that kind of new thing where we'll kind of go on recent events, do a little bit of Q&A? I like that concept.
Yep, you can catch us every Saturday. I think we can do it every Saturday, just letting you guys know what's happening down in La Tierrita, because we got to start knowing about what's happening in our countries, bro.
Yeah, I like that. I like that concept, and we'll do some more. We'll do some Q&A. It won't be super long. We'll cap it at 2 hours. But anyways, you guys, thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming, Carlos, and God bless you. Que Dios los bendiga.
Que los bendiga, se cuidan.
Buenas noches.
Good night.